welcome to the ITBA Next Generation Pinhooking Seminar. I'm delighted to see so many people here this evening, particularly so many people, not just from the next generation, but from the senior members as well. So it's fantastic to see such support for an event which has been organised by the Next Generation Committee, and we want to thank them for organising all of this. The Next Generation suffered badly with COVID, and one of the things when I became chairman of the ITBA that we really wanted to do was to reignite the ITBA, and thankfully due to the wonderful work of the ITBA Next Generation Committee and through firstly Orla Dunworth, who's now retired from chairmanship, and now currently Conor Wickstead, we have a very vibrant and lively committee, and they're doing great work to promote breeding for the next generation. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Conor, and you can enjoy the panel for the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. I'd just like to welcome you all tonight, and I want to start by thanking our panelists, Tom, Paul, our MC, Jane, Philip, and Alice. I want to express a big thank you to the ITBA team, the ITBA Chair, Kathy Grassick, and the Next Generation Committee for their help and assistance in making this event possible. It's heartening to see so many people in attendance. I hope you'll find it enjoyable and insightful, and please don't be afraid to ask questions and interact. And I'm now going to hand you over to Jane to get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Conor. I am wearing a Britney Spears inspired microphone, so if you can't hear me, I am not lip syncing. The next time a horse refuses to walk in the ring here, I'll completely understand why. It's a little bit daunting looking up at everybody, but thank you for such a good turnout. But I think it's fair to say that it deserves to be well supported, given that the panel that we have assembled here, there's very few people have the respect that these guys have in the industry, particularly when it comes to the area of pinhooking. So with that, I might just go through the panel. I won't take it for granted that everybody knows everybody. Alice, how did you get into the game, and what would you describe your role as in the industry today?
Thanks, Jane. I'm Alice Kavanagh, for anyone who doesn't know. I'm sure there's plenty who don't. So I got into the industry. I'm very lucky. Both my parents own a stud farm, Kildare Stud, based in Kildare, not too far from here. And my current role is broodmare manager at home in Kildare, and I also have my own consignment I set up a couple of years ago, AK Thoroughbreds, and I focus on selling mares and foals through AK Thoroughbreds. How I got here, I worked quite a bit in many places. I did a stint in Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, France, America, and a year and a half in England as well. So I worked at a couple of different places, and then inevitably came home, and yeah, I've been home now for 4.5 years, I think.
Where'd you learn the most?
Ooh, home.
Oh, home, yeah. That's a safe answer. Out of interest, when you come to the sales complex for AK Thoroughbreds with that hat on, do you rely on dad, or do you rely on family, or is it very much your neck is on the line, it's your money, your judgment?
I suppose through the foal prep, I'd rely at home, because I do that based at home at the moment. I would seek advice from both mum, dad, and my brother Rod a lot, but when we get to the sales, then it's kind of a different ball game. They move on because they're looking to buy mares, looking to buy foals, so it's very much myself and whatever team I've assembled. So it's a bit of a different pressure when you come here. It's then very much becomes my thing and my gig.
So when you're standing up there and you're bidding, the pulse is getting a little bit higher because it's definitely you.
Yeah, 100%.
We can all appreciate that. Philip, you can appreciate that because you've thankfully made the journey over. We appreciate you taking the time, and it's quite the treat that you've come. So tell us, what's the Philip Stauffenberg story?
I come from a show champion background. So since I was a child, I had the dream to become Olympic champion.
Lovely.
Always targeting high. Anyway, that didn't materialize, and so I got employed as assistant stud manager in a big German stud farm, and then I went on from there to start Karlshof. That's I was 10 years there, and then 1999 we set up our own farm, my wife and me, and we have since then been there. I started the Bloodstock agency back in '94, but then with the own farm, there was just no time to focus on it. And so after quite a good beginning, the first 4 yearlings we bought were all 3 were stakes winners, and 1 was unraced but became the dam of our first Derby winner. So that was quite a good start, but then the Bloodstock agency really became quiet. And then with the regards of pinhooking in 2012, I got asked by Andreas Putsch, a country fellow man, who has a farm in France, if I could advise him. And then we worked together for quite a few years, and he asked me if I could pinhook for him. So
what timeline are we talking now, Andreas?
Yeah, that's 2012, 2014. I think he left in 2016 or 17. So that went quite well at the beginning, and then other people came in, and so it's now what it is.
Yeah.
And so we are
very
breeding.
Much a family business now. Is that is it fair to say it's just a family business now?
Now, family business I can't say because we try to keep the children out of the business to do something.
ITBA Next Generation.
To earn proper money and do all the stupid things the father does.
I don't know, no. We're going to talk proper money now in a minute, and I'm pretty sure that can be made in Germany too.
However, no, of the kids, obviously, they like to join us at the Foal sales for the selection process and all comment and do something. Mary, my wife, she's very good in pedigrees. She is part of the selection team. But it's not in the day-to-day business. It's more or less me and the team at home.
Perfect. And tell me, there's so much to take there. Were you any good as a rider? Eventing? Olympic dreams?
I was not bad, but just not good enough to really compete at the highest level. And I had a few bad experiences with people who just failed to be in the top level and just had the problems with the alcohol, with everything. So I just thought, okay, that's not really the way I want to end.
Yeah.
And I have to do something different. And the farm where I was show champing, they had stallions, warm blood stallions. I was responsible for prepping the 2-year-old colts for the licensing process in Germany. Everything has to have a paper, so there's a licensing process for the warm blood stallions as well, so I did that. So it's a little bit similar to prepping a yearling, different in a way, but I was involved in that. So I took care there of the stallions and of the broodmare population beside riding. Wow. And so, I was always interested in thoroughbreds, but I never thought I will end there.
Lord above, you've some degree of horsemanship experience when you think of all the different levels that you've touched. And we'll get on to the selection process when you come to the sales. But Philip Stauffenberg, quite the story. You should write a book. What's going on over there? Paul, pick up the microphone. Tell us. The McCartans, they weren't always in horses, were they?
No. Anyway, so my name is Paul McCartan. I'm from Ballyphilip Stud in County Limerick. Some of you will know me, but I believe there's some people here tonight that may not have a big background in the horse business or whatever. But no, we didn't have a big horsey background. My father was a timber merchant, and my mother was a chemist. But a bit like that, they always, particularly my father, would have had an interest in horses and always kept a couple of national hunt mares. Is this thing working? It is.
I can hear you. I think everybody else. Can we all hear Paul?
So how I became interested in horses really was, we come from a place called Ballymahon in County Longford, which isn't a big horse area, but there was a family who lived about half a mile out the road, and my parents were friendly with this family. And there were 3 bachelor brothers there. They've all actually gone to God now. But they had a very small farm, about 30 acres. But they kept every kind of a horse you could imagine there. They kept Thoroughbred stallions to cover half-bred mares and to cover draft mares. They trained point-to-pointers very successfully. They trained inside the rails. They broke horses. They showed horses. Anything that could be done with a horse, they did it. And they did it without much facilities. They didn't have any lunging rings. They didn't have any, walking machines. There was none of that carry on there. So we were small kids in this environment all the time, and we didn't think we were learning, but we were learning an awful lot, I'd say, because I think when you're very young like that, you absorb an awful lot. And so we were there every day after school. We were there every weekend. We were there all through our holidays. And we were kind of totally surrounded with horses, immersed in horses. They used to foal mares as well, cover mares. All this stuff was going on. And I just got fascinated by the whole thing, Unlike Philip, I found out very early in life that I was a bad rider.
It's good that you knew it.
Yeah, well, I did know it, and I was very bad. I mean...
Any examples?
I was brutal, no. They're too painful to recall, but I tell you, I was bad. So anyway, it was quite a hurtful thing to...
was there any aspiration to ride in the...
Oh yeah, I had great aspirations, all right. But
the dream was alive
at one stage. There's no shortage of aspirations. But I was brutal, absolutely brutal. So, and I realised it early enough, and I said... I found it hard to accept it, but anyway, I did accept it, and I said to myself, all my brothers were good riders, particularly Jim.
That's really annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, it was really annoying. It came totally naturally to him, so, and he got to be on the Irish junior show jumping team and all that. So I was totally in his shadow. So I decided I better, do something, and I said, there's one thing I can do is work. And I started to kind of cop on. I said, I'll just keep working away there now with this. And then I became very interested in the mares and the foals and the stallions and all that. And the rearing of the stock, I was fascinated by all that. And I loved animals.
Did you figure out there's money to be made other than riding a horse? That's what a lot of people trigger. Oh, maybe it's easier to do this. Yeah.
I actually think now it's not a good way to make a living riding a horse at all. There's very, very few that make a very good living at it. So I'm kind of happier that I've now accepted the fact that I was a bad rider and that I can make a living out of horses in another way,
So you went from this is it, like back in your day, can I be honest?
Yeah, back in...
There was a lot of indigenous Irish farms that had the horse as well as the cows. There was a big rural community. That's right. Dwindling at the moment. And
it is.
Can you say without that neighbour, would you have gone a different route?
Probably would have gone a different route, yeah. I definitely had an affinity with animals, and I loved all animals, but particularly horses. But we got a great grounding there. And we didn't realise it at the time, but when we look back and know what we were doing, like they were throwing us up in these young horses as first riders and that. And we were driving horses in long ranges. We were taking out the stallions to cover the mares when we were 12 or 13 and all that kind of thing,
Health and safety weren't around then.
It was no big deal about it, It was just the way you did. But we were kind of learning how to handle horses all the time, and we were learning in spite of ourselves,
Where did Rathbarry come in?
Rathbarry came in well down the line. So basically, we kind of moved forward a good number of years. So I kind of, I went to school, and when school came to an end, I did quite okay in my exams and that. And my father wanted me to become a dentist. My mother wanted me to work in the bank. And so I didn't like any of those options. I didn't want to be looking into people's mouths for the rest of my life.
Dentist was a very particular... Did you have an affinity with teeth? Did you have particularly good teeth?
No, not particularly. So anyway, I was kind of always thinking about the idea of stud management. I said, that sounds interesting, And then at that time, there was the National Stud course. And I think, geez, I might do that now, But anyway, I actually went to college for 4 years, which was a good thing, in the sense that I had 4 good years that I enjoyed in Dublin. I can't remember learning much up there at all, to be honest with you. I did law for a year, failed that very badly. Then I did a commerce degree, which I actually got. But even driving up here now, I was trying to think that I learned anything there, and I can't remember learning much. But I do remember learning an awful lot from people I subsequently worked for. So then I said, finish the college, what do we do now? So I decided to try to get into stud management. Didn't know many people in the thing. And so the National Stud course was an obvious starting point. So I wrote to that and I was accepted. But in the meantime, I had also written to a number of stud farms in England and America. I got one answer from James Delhook, who was starting out with Judman Farms at the time. And he gave me a job and he gave me my start. And it was a fantastic opportunity. Went over to England, over on the boat. It was my first job. I was very excited and went into a stud farm where things were done to a very high standard. And they knocked the edges off me there. But I enjoyed it immensely, and I was fascinated by the whole thing, and it was very, very exciting,
What stallions were there at the time?
No, in fact, was the stallion there at the time, and it was just, I think Rainbow Crest was a 3-year-old in training at the time, and I remember going down to Jeremy Trees to see him before he ran into Guineas and all that. So there were great people there, like Simon Mockridge actually was the second man there in Judgment at that time.
Wow.
And he's obviously the top man in now, and we're good friends still, So, and they were very good to me there. They kind of helped me. I kind of looked to them for advice, particularly James Delhook, Grant Pritchard Gordon. And they advised me to travel, which I was very anxious to do anyway. And they set me up at a farm in New Zealand, which has belonged to the Wallace family. And Michael Wallace, the Bloodstock agent now that's based in America, he was the grandson of the man I worked for. So he was only 4 years old at that time, So that was, again, a great experience there again. So I went from there to work for Judmont in Kentucky. Then I came back. I was always kind of very interested in going to places where I'd learn. I never really was ever asked anybody what I was going to be paid, what the holidays were. I just wanted to find out where the best places were to learn, so that I would learn from the best people, So I went to Cordufster, James Egan, who was very, very good to me. The whole Egan family were. And then after that, a job became available in Mount Coolstud, assistant manager's job. And that was a big stepping stone for me. I stayed there 6 years. Alan Livingston was the owner manager of that. Fantastic horseman. Had a huge understanding of the business, was very interested in young people, in educating them and bringing them along and that. So I stayed with him 6 years. And then after that, I decided I needed a different type of experience. So I went to a public stud. And again, Liam Cashman was the Cashman family in Rathbarry. I worked for them for 8 years and got massive experience there. Like it was such a busy farm.
Who was there at that time? What horses?
Well, your uncles were there, Billy and Dan.
Billy and Dan, yeah.
No better horsemen in the country. And I mean, there were so many sharp people working there at the time that you learn from them. And Brendan Holland was there, Grove Stud. Jerry O'Sullivan, who has his own farm now, Cooneen Stud. There were great people there, and there was a great bunch of us there, and we learned a lot from each other, and we learned a lot because of the number of horses that we were dealing with. Like, we were covering mares, say, from February right through to September, because I was in the National Hunt Division. We were prepping yearlings on the same property, say, from the beginning of August onwards, and we were going to all those sales. Then we come back from the yearling sales, and there'd be a bunch. There could be 30 foals we got ready for the sales, 20 mares, all that. And then you come back from all the foal sales and the mare sales, and you'd have about maybe 15 or 20 horses to break, national hunts, so you were flat out all the time. Huge experience, and I'm very glad they did it. And after 8 years of that, then I got a very good job managing Croom House for Dennis Brosnan, which again was a massive step up for me. You couldn't have actually asked for a better job. He was a very, very good boss. You knew, after talking for half an hour, I knew exactly what he wanted. We got on like a house on fire. Worked very hard there, and he gave me opportunities to kind of get involved in ownership of horses and to make proper money, basically. And then I actually started working for him in the year 2000, and I started with him in February. I think in July we bought Ballyphilip, which that time was 60 acres of a cattle and sheep farm. It was fairly run down. And Marie and I got married in October, so that was a big year for us. So I was managing Croom House for 14 years, but also working down in our own farm, and Marie was working down there as well. When our kids came along, we just found out that we couldn't do everything, so we actually stopped working. I stopped working in Croom House, and we went on our own then at that point, you know.
And then the rest is history.
Well, there's a bit to come, hopefully.
It goes to show. It goes to show.
It's not all history.
The different routes that people go. Like, I had no idea you went traveling the world as you did, and then you spent as long. It's not like some people think, okay, I'll go there to learn, but I'll only spend 6 months there and 9 months there. But like, you kind of you spent years in each spot.
I did, but prior to kind of getting those kind of long-term jobs, I did travel and did kind of 6 month stints here, and I'd recommend, as Alice was just saying there, you know, going to all those countries, fantastic experience. I actually, if I hadn't got those permanent jobs, I would have done that for more years, because I really enjoyed it and I was learning plenty. Just to made the ball bounce, I got a kind of a management job, and then I took it, and that was it, you know.
I'm interested.
But I would encourage young people to travel and to get out of your comfort zone, go to the places, find out where the good places are to learn, and go to those, and you know, don't go for the soft touch all the time. Formal education is great. I would think, you know, a university course is very good, equine science, but you don't need to be doing them all your life. You know, 1 or 2 of those, and then get out in the real bad world and face reality and get on with it.
Learn on the job.
Yeah, learn the job, absolutely.
Yeah. I think when I was 13, 14, 15, people, people give you advice because you're young and you're impressionable. And the only like real advice that I thought was of serious material was, if you surround yourself with the best people, they'll carry you forward.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to fall behind.
That's right.
So as a rider, where did I go?
Sorry?
As a rider who wanted to ride at the time, where did I go?
With me?
Me.
Oh, you, yeah.
We're
But it
talking
didn't
about,
work
it's
with me,
all
I'll
about
tell
you,
that.
Paul.
I was surrounded by great riders, and the better day I got, the worse I was getting.
No. Long story short, I went to Ballydoyle. It worked out all right. We rode for a while. But if you surround yourself with the best people, they tend to carry you forward. And to that end, a lot of veterinary students, a lot of veterinary nurse students, and a lot of people in that line of work go to this man down at the very end, Tom O'Brien.
Yeah. Do you want this thing, Tom? You do?
Renowned veterinary surgeon. I love the picture of him on all the promos in his PPE blue gear. Very, very flattering, Tom. Tell us, what's your story?
I'm Tom O'Brien. I'm an equine vet, and I've been a vet for the last 17 years. And I suppose I grew up with a national hunt background. My dad's family were into national hunt racing, breeding, the kind of point-to-point scene of the 80s and 90s. And that was, my exposure. We didn't really have ponies growing up, but we could ride my uncle's horses when we were big enough, and stop riding them when we were too big. And I suppose I always had an aspiration to be a vet, and I went to UCD and qualified as a vet. And it was, without ever giving it too much thought, it was always going to be as an equine vet, work with horses. And I think, for me, I've been very lucky in my career. There's been doors opened, and any time a door opened, I've kind of stepped through it, and I think it has served me well. So I went to visit Kentucky as a student, and while I was there, someone asked me if I wanted to do an internship. So that was to spend a year or two in a hospital over there, and I did that. And that was a huge exposure for me to the breeding industry, and I suppose the stud or the surgery side of stud medicine that is preparing foals and yearlings for sales and for future racing. And that, I think a lot of vets, and maybe everyone would agree, your first couple of jobs are very, very formative. And that certainly was a very formative time for me, and it's the area that I've slowly gravitated and worked to get back towards. So currently, my interests are really focused on juvenile orthopedics, and so anything that includes in foals and yearlings. I'm also interested in surgeries on mares to help them go in foal and stay in foal, and then we still have to do everything else. So everything else is, the emergency stuff, and on from there. But so I spent 2 years in Kentucky. From there, I went to Wisconsin to do what is a very specific surgery training program with large animals, and that was interesting. We got to work on a lot of cattle as well as horses, and in Wisconsin, the horses are worth, they're all backyard pleasure horses, so just low-level riding, but the cattle are really what are worth money. So we get to do repair fractured legs and on cows and bulls, whereas no one would spend that kind of money on a horse. So they were worth hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, and it was quite an interesting time. So when I was finished that, I went to Switzerland. I spent 6 months there, and then I came back to Ireland, and I went to Feathered Equine Hospital in Tipperary, and I spent just over 10 years there, and recently I've moved up to the Curragh, to Sycamore Lodge Equine Hospital, and that's where I am now. But I suppose, as you know, you're a product of your environment. The places I've worked in have all been excellent places. I've learned a huge amount in all of them, but it has always led me to focus on, I suppose, juvenile orthopedics. So corrective surgeries, be them straightening legs or taking chips out of joints, or various different procedures to try and get horses, foals or yearlings to the sales, to maximize their value and maximize their future athletic potential.
So there's a question here I have to ask, because I have to get the wording right. A screw is more effective than a strip. Where did you learn that?
So I was just asked for something snappy, so I came up with that.
Well, it was snappy. It got our attention.
I have nothing to back it up. No, it's just so basically there are horses that have crooked legs. There are two procedures. One is called a periosteal strip, and one is where you put a screw in their leg across a growth plate to try and straighten it. And a strip doesn't really work, but a screw does. So that's the motto. So I'm looking to get it put on the front of the clinic on the Curragh. So but we'll
very
see.
effective. It'll get people in the door.
Yeah.
Out of interest, when you were doing the $1 million cows, what was the most, I suppose, surprising thing you learned when you were doing projects, essentially, learning on the job?
I think working on cattle, it allows you to, that sometimes less is more. So on cows, generally they're very poor animals to knock out or anesthetize, so they don't do very well. So a lot of the surgery we do on them, we do with them standing or sedated, or just with regional blocks, so that you numb their leg essentially. So I think as I would have worked then, you kind of try and transfer that to horses, and I suppose I would end up doing a lot of surgery with horses standing or under a short anesthetic, and it's kind of, you've learned those kind of what would be considered basic or rudimentary techniques, but they're very effective. They really work, and sometimes less is more. If you pair it back to doing the job right, doing it quickly, you don't need all the frills and all the kind of the circus that can surround equine surgery sometimes.
Yeah, overreaction can result in overcorrection. But we'll get on to, you have a bit of a slideshow for us as the show progresses?
Yeah, just some examples. It's not to stand here and lecture anybody, but it's just some examples if it makes a bit of sense for people, so we can show some stuff at some stage.
That opens us up to now actually getting down to the tricky business. We have a roaming microphone, so what we might do is we'll talk about getting to the sales and purchasing the foal, and then we might stop it. If anybody has any questions, please do take the opportunity to ask, because it might just make you some money. So Alice is around 20 days to go. 1,000 foals. Big book. How do you make your shortlist? Because you can't see 1,000 foals, can you?
Well, I suppose it depends what your budget is.
Okay, so give us a hypothetical situation. Everybody's in a different position.
Exactly, yeah. I suppose the majority of people here are young people, so the most common way that you guys are going to be buying into foals is making a syndicate or going in with a group of people to pool your money together to maybe potentially buy something that's going to be more valuable as a yearling rather than buying something that's, you know, a couple of grand just to yourself, because if you're putting in that risk, you may as well spread it and try get something that you really love rather than compromising too much because of your budget. I'd say that is something that a lot of people tend to do our age, or a lot of people here. So I think the first thing you do is look at your catalogue and think, okay, well, the horses on paper that are going to make 6 figures, maybe we mightn't look at those on our first run, because you're only going to...
So we're dashing out the Dubowis and the Kingmans and all the different...
Exactly. Now, in saying that, there might be some that fall through the net, and some of them do make less money for if they're, you know, some issues. But I think that's a good starting point to kind of say, this is potentially what I can afford, or that sort of thing. I suppose for me, I'm going to be focusing on selling foals and buying foals hopefully in Newmarket. So at the moment I'm prepping foals at home for clients and for myself as well. So I'll be selling 21 foals in total. So
to hopefully some people here.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Come on down, guys. So unless I see something within my own yard, I think my neighbour's going to be Claire Manning, so unless she has a superstar that really draws my eye, I probably won't be shopping. But yeah, I'd say budget is a huge thing for people to, I suppose, have at the forefront of their mind. There's no point in spending time looking at things that you're realistically not going to be able to afford, and you'll only end up driving yourself mad at looking
Yeah,
at
well,
looking at
we've all tempted ourselves. You know, we'll just follow in this night of thunder that might make 10 grand, but we know it probably won't. If, for instance, you come here in November, you buy a foal, are you thinking immediately, I want to take that to the Orby, I want to take that to Arcana, or are you thinking, I'll bring it home and I'll see?
Again, I think it does depend. If you're doing it on a big scale, you have your sale in mind. You know what letter of the dam each sale is starting at. You'll say,
okay, so there's a good point. Don't presume that people know that. Every sale is different and everybody's thinking differently. So you're going to say, am I going to rule out this dam because of its name?
Potentially. It depends. It depends on a lot of things, but basically for a yearling sale, generally speaking, the dam's name, they move it forward 4 letters every year. I think that's right. Please correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. And a lot of the sales do start on the same letter, but some don't. And a lot of people believe, including myself, where you land on your sale, whether the time of the day or the day of the sale, can impact the value of the animal you're selling.
Okay, so say somebody's in here in the audience, they've got 20 grand in their budget, respectable money, and they want to say bring it back to Tatterstalls in October next year or September next year. If everything goes right and they don't need Tom O'Brien, please God, what will it cost them?
So
what will it cost to bring, in general, what would it cost to bring a foal back from November to September?
So you're
again, provided everything goes right, and we know well, things
exactly.
happen.
You're talking the bones of 15 grand.
Okay, so the person spending 20 has to be willing to go 35, 40
and that's with everything going well. That's including your farrier, your keep bills. My thesis I did in college, I was saying to Connor yesterday, was actually on the comparing the profitability of pinhooking yearlings versus homebreds, and I was flicking through that last night because I thought, God, I better look up on my costs. And that was done back in 2016, I think. And the difference of the keep costs then to now, I couldn't even get over. I had down that the keep costs for a yearling in prep then was $28.90.
So foal to yearling?
Well, now this is just for prep, so your 8-week or 10-week prep per day. And that's gone up to 40 to 45 euros a day for prep now. So like even that. And
that's a horse in training.
Yeah. Now there are other places and different prices, and you can go lower.
But in general, you don't want to cut corners if you want to do the job right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so Philip, she's selling here in Goffs in November. She's no good to us. You're coming, you have 1,000 lots. Obviously, you would be dealing with a different budget. We respect that. So that gives us a different insight into what you value when you're looking at the book. And Marion, of course, is telling you what to do.
Yeah, obviously, there's one limiting factor for me compared to most of the people here, that I'm coming from abroad. So I ship everything back home to Germany, and then from Germany again to the sales. So that means all the costs, all the logistics, what are involved, are more expensive than most of my competitors. So I calculate 20,000 per foal. Shipping them home, X-raying, everything. I'm surprised about the prices you mentioned.
The inflation in prices.
Yeah, I charge, if somebody outside comes and wants to have his yearling prepped, I charge 55 per day. And I wouldn't do it for less. And I'm thinking about raising it again, because it might have to do that we just do a little bit of a different prep, but let's do that later. So for me, from all the logistics and everything, I can't cover every sale. So I try to focus on stallions, on foals, which I can get into one of the select sales.
So when you're
let's say-
purchasing, you know, I want to go to Deauville, I want to go to Newmarket.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to, the foals I'm buying, as physicals as from the pedigree, should at least be able to get into book 2. If you look into the pinhooking figures overall, I just do not want to disillusionate, but it's quite interesting if you go through all this year's yearling sales, then you will see that the most profitable sale for pinhooks, not only by the amount every horse has made, only by figures, if you add the 20,000 on top, is the most profitable sales were Tattersall's Book 1 and Goffs Orbi Book 1. And it might sound interesting, and obviously you have always fantastic results at all the other sales, but from a point of probability, the probability is smaller in these sales to hit the jackpot.
Yeah, and we only ever open the TDN and see the good news, don't we? So that's
yeah,
interesting.
so that means that I limit normally the stallions here, which are just not appealing to the higher end users. I limit, unfortunately, I limit the fillies. The fillies which have not a good enough page, I just eliminate most of them.
So as regards good enough page, are you looking at foundation family, bottom of the page? Or are you looking at mare produce record? Do you buy out of a mare that was lowly rated? Do you buy a mare that's unproven as a producer?
Yes, I do. Depending then on, obviously,
Sire. Yeah.
the sire in one way, but the physical most important way. But overall, just if there's a, let's say I made the mistake last year buying a filly by Advertise, who I didn't have on the list, but I just liked her. I saw her out of the angle of my eye and thought, okay, gosh, that's a nice filly. Very good physical. So she was sister to a 2-year-old winner at that time, not fancily rated, but okay. And yeah, she still was a good physical as a yearling, a very good physical. Nobody wanted to buy her. So what I want to say is just with these fillies, if you don't have really a page, then it's a risky business to buy these fillies, and so that makes it a little bit easier for me to have a selection I'm looking at. So I don't look at all the 1,000 foals here. Probably it will be 650 or something like that, because a certain number is just eliminated by paper.
And obviously we all try and prioritize what we value on paper. In terms of first season sires, if you're coming back next year, do you buy a Gaiath next week, or do you buy the horse that has the runners next week, like next year, like Advertise had runners? Do you take that risk, or are you, like for instance, you had a lovely Sutsas this year, but you sold it this year. You're going to have a Sutsas for next year when he has runners.
That's a difficult question. I would say I have burnt my fingers several times with all of them, or with all sorts of them.
But down through the years, has it worked out for you or not?
Sometimes it has, and sometimes it hasn't. So to make a rule really is not easy. And I guess when I see something like an Advertise again, I will go for it. And because at the end, and that's always a little bit of balancing out, you won't make with all of your pinhooks a profit. But if you are convinced it's a racehorse, yeah, then I say, okay, I might take a hit here and sell for less than a good profit, but she might turn out to be a racehorse to promote what you are doing.
Your farm and your business. Interesting, because there's a lot of young people will want to get themselves established under their own banner, and if they have something to promote them in terms of a Royal Ascot winner or a group winner, that's worth more than money.
Ideally, these things happen, but we all know that not every horse which is presented here at the sale, or we present at the sales, not every horse is a star. Yeah, so I think you said it wisely, that it's easier if you make a syndicate together than instead of being on your own all the time, because you can pool a little bit more money together and have a better chance to do that. Obviously, especially young people always and not only young ones, I think we as well are always convinced that the next horse we have bought is the star, and we dream about it. Yeah, but I think for especially for the young ones really to start, it's better not to do everything on your own. Really,
it's hedging your bets, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a bigger chance. But anyway, so I'm selecting, like with the colts, it's a little bit different. I think in a situation like where we are at the moment, where there is a certain amount of correction in the market, I think I will be a little bit more careful with the sires. Normally I don't take care. I just like to buy the nice horse, and even if it's by a sire, for example, I bought a few years ago a Free Eagle. Who would pinhook a Free Eagle? Yeah. So
it probably won a group race now or something.
People were laughing at me when I said I bought a Free Eagle, and I said he's a lovely horse, yeah. And so luckily, just in the buying process, I didn't have him on my list, yeah, because obviously Free Eagle was just not a successful stallion. And the vendor...
Was this after or before he had runners?
No, after he had runners.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, after he had runners. So the vendor, when I looked at his consignment, he said, "You haven't looked at my best horse." Yeah, I looked at Star Spangled Banners and whatever, all the fancy ones. And he said, "You haven't looked at my best one." I said, "What is your best one?" Yeah, don't have it on the list. And he said, "It's a Free Eagle." And I said, "Oh, forget about it." Yeah. So why?
But you were polite and you looked anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, and he said, "I know you want to buy a nice horse, so look at the horse." So I did it, and a lovely horse, fantastic walker. He was brother to group winner, but just a free eagle. Anyway, I bought him, and then I have a kind of syndicate where people invest, horsey people, non-horsey people, and I couldn't sell him to my
the syndicate.
people. Nobody wanted to have him, so I had to keep 80% of him, and so I paid 80,000 for him, which was ridiculous money anyway. So I paid 80 because Harry Sweeney was the underbidder. So most of
He
the
knows what he's
pinhooker-
doing.
Yeah, the most pinhooker would say, okay, you are bidding against the final consumer, so that's stupid anyway. Anyway, I bought him. And then it's the same situation then when you are there with your yearling. You are trying to sell your yearling, and most of the people, they pull out everything you have, leave the free eagle in. Yeah, so I said, listen, that's the nicest horse you will see, or one of the nicest horses you will see all week. Forget about it. There's no chance with the free eagle. So anyway, a few people I could persuade, and then we sold him for 150,000
Wow.
guineas. So it was a very good profit. I was happy that I had 80% because I made a good profit. But it shows you at the end, even a very uncommercial sire, if the physical is good enough, you always find somebody who is willing to spend extra money on them.
Two things. Was he any good?
I don't know.
Oh, you would know.
No, he's a 3-year-old. He's a 3-year-old
it's
who
recent.
went to Australia. So it's a little bit early.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything negative about him, but I haven't heard anything positive. So we will have to wait another year.
We'll come back next year, guys.
But as a 3-year-old in Australia at that time, it's.
But
not
the
easy.
other spectrum of that is your name is a brand, and your brand is established as selling good horses. So a lot of people would trust in your preparation and your judgment, which probably helped selling that horse.
If you say that, it could be the case, yeah.
I'm just thinking in the perspective, if young people in here, including myself, were to do that, it would be perhaps a bit different.
Yes, but at the end, if you are starting off, okay, everybody wants to make money. That's the game here. But if you are not losing badly and you produce a nice horse, then you can set up your brand. And so if you are just making money, people say, okay, it's expensive to buy there, the horse is useless. So I don't know if it's really, if I would give the advice only looking at that financial point. I think at the end, the most important thing is that we sell racehorses. Yeah. And if we don't sell them, all the money at one stage, it will just.
It'll come back to bite you.
Yeah.
And that knocks us on to Paul, because we do live in a world where there's more sales than races at the moment, and there seems to be another one added on every year. So the tight right-handed circle that is the sales ring seems to be to the fore of our minds. And again, you guys breed and you buy to sell. At what stage do you find the balance between commercial page and racehorse? What takes precedence in your head?
What takes precedence? Yeah. Well, you have to make money. But a bit like what Philip was saying there, you're in it for the long haul, you're in it for the long haul. Like, we'll be at this now, I'd say, for the rest of our lives. So we kind of look at it that way. So you like to be selling horses that want to be good race horses. That's very important.
Okay.
But it's a balanced act between the two. You've got to make money as well. But a bit like Philip, I was kind of like, I don't mind selling an odd horse if they don't make money, but if it goes on to be a good race horse, that'll be and you don't know where the good horses will come from. Sometimes it's a horse you breed, and sometimes it's a horse you buy.
Nando Prado springs to mind, doesn't he?
Sorry?
Nando Prado springs to mind.
Nando Prado, yeah, absolutely. Sure, he was a great one for us. Like, I mean, we gave a lunatic's prize for him. But
well, go on, tell us the story. What happened?
Well, I'm sure everybody here probably heard the story because I've told it about 1 million times. But he, sure, we gave a lot of money for him. He was a beautiful foal, and I remember the morning we bought him. Marie said to me, "Have you any one foal in your head?" And she knew the answer, you know, before. So I said, "Yeah." I said, "Anita Wiggins' foal." I said, "That's the foal I want to get today," you know. I said, "Jesus, he's going to cost." And yeah, he is. And
so why was he? Just tell us.
Well, he was just such a nice physical. Funny enough, I nearly missed him. He was in Ed Player's consignment, and he, for some, probably my own secretarial work doesn't be the best sometimes, and I kind of didn't have him marked, or something happened anyway. And John Deneen was showing the horse there, and he said to me, he knew that I'd like Kodiak, because I had a good look with Kodiak, and he said, "Did you see the Kodiak fold?" And I said, no, I didn't. And anyway, they pulled him out anyway, and sure, he just stood there, and you know, you just fell in love with him straight away. And did everything right, absolutely huge, full of presence, and you know, size and strength and action and big eye and big ears and everything. You couldn't fault him. And even the other day I got a photograph from the National Stud that's gone into the brochure this year, and it's just a pleasure to look at him. Like, I mean, you just couldn't fault him, you know. So anyway, we decided we'd go after him, you know. And you know, we generally don't go north of 100. So we were north of 150. I said to Marie, "What do you think here?" And there was no answer coming back. So we gave it one more shot, and we put another 5 on. We got him at 165. So anyway, he was a simple horse. Like the lads, he came home and the lads said, "Jeez, that's the best one you've ever had. You know, it's beautiful and everything." And he, you know, like a lot of those good horses, he kind of prepped themselves, and you know, you didn't have to do much with him at all. And he did everything right until the day before he was going to the sale, or the morning he was going to the sale. We had shot him behind the night before, which I don't do anymore, and he actually put a gash in his hind fetlock with his hind shoe, and we actually put him on the truck, hoping that we'd get him right, but he got the new mark and he was actually lame and sore, so we didn't show him to anybody. Got the vets to sort him out. It was only kind of bad timing, really. It was only.
He was going to book 1? He
was in book 1, yeah. So he went home again. We brought him back for the December sales, and he looked $1 million, and everybody said, "Jeez, he's a gorgeous horse," but there was no money there to buy him. So we actually had a good sale that year, and we decided we'd roll the dice and send him to Clive. So I rang Clive's number anyway, and Clive was. He was on his way to his holiday, so there was no answer for about 8 hours. And then I eventually got through to his secretary, and she said, "We've no room here." And I says, "Clive will have room for this one."
God, you're like Mary and Joseph, aren't you? God
yeah,
almighty.
no room at the inn, that's right. So anyway, long story short, you know, Clive rang us, I think about March, and he said, "This is a good horse, you know. You should be thinking about Royal Ascot for him." And I said, "Jesus, Royal Ascot, you know. That'll probably kill him, you know." So yeah, I said, "Grand, sure, we'll see, Clive, you know." So anyway, it was the year of the COVID, and it was kind of getting on. I think about 2. He eventually had a runner. He got an entry about 2.5 weeks before Royal Ascot, and Clive was in Newmarket, and Clive was expecting him to win, I'd say, and he didn't. He was 50, kind of was in the stalls for a long time and fell out and was very green and finished 5th. Ran all right, you know. And I was kind of quietly relieved. I said, "Jesus, grand, he'll forget about Royal Ascot now, you know." So
curb his enthusiasm.
Yeah, curb his enthusiasm. So anyway, we had the post-race discussion anyway, and he agreed that it's the wrong team to go to Royal Ascot, you know. So anyway, that was fine anyway until the week of Royal Ascot. And that year, the Coventry was on the Saturday. And on the Tuesday morning, I'm down the fields, and the phone rings. Clive Cox comes up on the thing and said, "Jesus, he's after breaking his neck now or something."
He's not chasing now, Lord.
Yeah. And anyway, he said to me, "Paul, we'll have to put this horse into Coventry." He said he did a piece of work there on Saturday. He said, "We'll frighten you." And I said, Clive, don't ask me to do that. Please don't ask me to do that.
How much is this costing you now?
The phone call.
No, the supplement. I presume it to be supplemented, or were you in the race?
Oh, no. So
you were in the race in March,
it wasn't a pre-entry, so it was to enter on the Tuesday.
Oh, lovely.
To run on the Saturday, so it was normal stuff, you know. So anyway, I said, Clive, I don't want to do that now. Please don't ask me to do that. So he said, go in and have a chat with Marie. So I goes into Marie anyway, we had a big discussion about it anyway, and we came out and rang Clive. Definitely not. So he got kind of half ticked with me on the phone. And I went back into Marie and I said, that man isn't happy now. And she said, she'll ring him back. This is 10 to 10 now. You know, the thing is closing at 10 o'clock. So she said, anyway, I rang him back and he said, put the horse in. And he was delighted anyway, you know. So he didn't ring me then until the Saturday morning. And I'm waking up every morning at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock and I said, Jesus, what did I let him put that horse in that race for? He'll get malafusted. And anyway, so Saturday morning he rings me and he has the horse at Royal Ascot, you know. And I'm looking at the betting all morning. So the horse has started at 20 to 1. The next thing he's 33 to 1. The next thing he's 50 to 1. And I said, Clive, this horse has no hope. And he said, we've all backed him here. He said, do you want to back him? And I said, jeepers, I don't even have an account. So, I said, sure, throw 100 on each way for me there. And anyway, so anyway, long story short, he
got 150 to 1.
He won at 150 to 1. He was the longest prize winner in Royal Ascot history until this year. I think another one won at 150 to 1 this year. So Anyway, it's a good story.
It is a good story, yeah. It is a good story. Because the long and the short of that story is for a lot of people who whatever, if 150 grand is a lot of money for you to pay for a foal, or if 10 grand is a lot to pay for your foal, when you don't get to the yearling sale, it is soul destroying. Like it can cripple you. And there was a silver lining.
There was, and that's, you know, that's what horses can do to you. You know what I mean?
Were you ever tempted to breeze them?
I'm not a breeze-up man. I don't like the breeze-ups. So I kind of felt that put him into training. You know, I was kind of thinking that we'd, you know, be running maybe at the back end of the year rather than go for Royal Ascot and that, you know.
Win a maiden
I don't kind of like to rush them, basically, you know.
Okay.
So anyway, that's the way that one worked out, you know.
Before we move off the topic, we have to ask about the pedigree that's just appeared here on my right. You know, some people would call her a mare. I would probably call her an ATM machine in equine form.
Yeah.
How did you buy lot 503, rated 46?
Yeah.
What was the attraction to Anna Law?
What was the attraction to Anna Law? Well, she cost me 14 grand, okay? And so the money was right.
What sale?
She was in the sale that we just had there, the horse and training sale in Newmarket. And she was only 2. She was only 2 years old, so she'd run a couple of times that year. I liked the pedigree. I liked the fact that she was a half-sister to a Group 2 winning 2-year-old.
Danbridge 7 from 11. Soundness is a big thing nowadays. We're going to get on to Tom in a minute. Yeah,
and I still kind of go for those mares, you know, that are I tend to go for fillies that are half the black type rather than being black type themselves. It's just the thing I have that they might make better brood mares than the ones that actually were good race horses, you know. And I also like to look down the page, and I'd like to see Group 1 there somewhere. Now, I think Atlala was, he was third in the July Cup. And then down along here, there's another, where is it there now? Brashy. And now that's the Pre-Royal Oak, but it's still a Group 1. I know it's a distance race, you know. But there's a good bit of depth in that pedigree. Lawman, we didn't know much about him in terms of being a sire of broodmares, but he was an influence for good looks, and I loved that in the pedigree. And she was particularly good-looking mare. Not huge, but very good conformation, very good limbs, very correct. I loved the night shift bit of it, because again, there was a lot of night shift in her in the sense that she was deep and strong and good limbs. And Dominion, I'd like him in the pedigree as well. Good influence for speed and that, you know. And I just kind of thought she was, she'd be coming in at the right money at 14 grand, and like, I mean, you couldn't have written the script better. We sent her to Dark Angel.
First year.
First year, so we covered her as a 3-year-old quite early, which a lot of people don't do. And I was a bit worried about it, but I'm not worried about it since, because the first one she had was Batash. And he was a belter. He made 200 grand as a yearling. He was a very good looking horse.
I can't imagine any stage of his life he looked weak.
No, I know I have the benefit of hindsight, but he was one horse in my lifetime that stood out to me, that really excited me. And I used to go out and look at him in the field, and he just had this action, and he had it every day. I went out to look at him. Not so much as a young foal, like I always, said he was a grand foal, big, strong, or good, strong fella, good limbs. But when he was a kind of a weanling right through the winter, every day you go out in the field and you just couldn't take your eyes off him, And he prepped well and turned into a lovely, lovely yearling. Yeah.
So then did you just marry her to Dark Angel from there on?
Yeah, well, like that, like I'd be always kind of talking to people and trying to learn. But I remember speaking to Rory Mahon one time, and they're, of Judman Farms, and they're one of the best breeders in the world. And he said that when they strike gold with a mating, they repeated and repeated and repeated, and that was, if it was good enough for Judman, it was good enough for me.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked out.
So that was that.
That was a lucky day, wasn't it?
That was an extremely lucky day. Like, I mean, if I go home and she's dead in the morning, I couldn't complain. She's done so much for us, Hopefully she won't be.
Hopefully she won't be. Like, I wasn't expecting that to come out.
Yeah. So.
I'm sure Marie's looking after her well.
Yeah, she sure is.
So Tom, the guys are coming to the sales, and everybody, different set of eyes, different set of judgment. And we're thinking, when you love the swagger of a foal and the page matches, but you're looking at those knees, maybe you're looking, it's a bit out or it's a bit in. What can we forgive, and what should we never forgive?
I think you have to, for the most part, I think you really have to be quite happy with what you buy. I don't think buy too big of a problem that you think you can
Don't buy a project.
Yeah, don't buy a project, because invariably it can be trickier to fix than you might think. So I think the first thing to appreciate is, I suppose, what is normal from a conformation point of view. And I think most people, if you look at foals, will see that they're born quite weak. A lot of them will want to toe out when they're born, and as they get older, their legs straighten up, their chest widen, and eventually some of them will begin to toe in on you. So a lot of the work I do will be work on foals, some to get to a foal sale, but more with a yearling sale in mind. And all of that work I will do, or 99.9% of it, is really focused on getting a foal to toe out, because the window of opportunity that you can get them from being either straight or towing in is very short. So if once they're 12 or 16 weeks old, there isn't a suitable surgical intervention. So I'm really, in foals, and this is a long way of answering this question, but in foals I'm not really worried about their knees too much. I want to get the foundations right. And there's a combination of that will be through farrier work. But if by 7 or 8 weeks those foals are quite straight or towing in, I'll be advising to put a screw in the level of their fetlock. So you're putting a screw across a growth plate, stops the growth plate growing on the outside, the inside stays growing, and then they begin to toe out. I'll try and will this click forward. Yeah. So I'll just show you here what that screw looks like. So that's this the laser. That's I turned it off there. Okay, so that the one on the bottom left. That's just a screw growing across a growth plate. It's in a knee, and that's the idea of it. So that's what we do in foals. And the point about this is that when you get to a foal sale and you're selecting a foal that you're going to pinhook as a yearling, there's nothing you can really do to change how they look on the ground. So whether they're towing in, whether they're towing out, whether they're straight, that is set up. That is that is done. You're not going to change it. So for me, either have them straight or slightly toeing out when you're selecting them. And I'll play these videos if I can, and I'll just give you an idea. So for me, on the image on the left, it says knock-kneed and valgus. Something like that is for me there's a risk to it, but for the most part, they'll only improve themselves. You can impact that a little bit with trimming, but as their chest widens, they'll improve for you. The horse on the left, that horse is toeing in on the ground, and you can't change their fetlocks. You can, and I often will do something with their knees to push their knees in, but in effect, you're creating an optical illusion. And I'll show you a couple of different types of yearlings coming up here. So this is a yearling that, if you can see it walking towards you, it's very base narrow. Its knees are inclined to push out a little bit, and it's quite straight through its fetlocks. And to put screws in that animal at some stage to push its knees back in underneath it, you will end up with a fairly okay result. I think the timing of it is important. The later you leave these in the year, so doing them in May, June, July is much more effective than doing them in March. These animals, as you will know, they change hugely from March to May through the growth they experience on grass. And so doing them very early, you're probably not dealing with they'll change again physically, and oftentimes they'll revert or they'll come up with another problem. So again, this is a horse that is very correct on the ground for me, but again is pushing his knees, and that is the ideal candidate for a horse that would need screws. In reality, I think this horse will be fine itself if you have enough time, but the sales date is a specific point in time. So you know, if you did nothing with this horse and saw it again in February or March of its 2-year-old year, it'll likely be correct. But you're trying to get to a sales date in September, October, so some surgical intervention is warranted. And this is what you definitely don't want to buy. So this animal is extremely crooked. It should have had a screw as a foal in its fetlock, particularly on the off leg. And if you watch it walk up towards you a few times, so it's toeing in on the ground. There's nothing underneath the knee to support it, and the knee will push out over the top of it. And regardless of what kind of a surgery I can do on the knee at this stage, it's kind of damage limitation. It's never going to look very good. So these are the ones that someone rings you up and says, I want to bring you a yearling, I want to show it to you. We bought it at the sales. We think we're going to be able to correct it. And you're standing in front of them going, this is a mess. I can't do anything with it. The other type that we will get that comes to be looked at is this foal that's very outward rotated, and people think you can correct that, and you can't really correct it. See how that right front or off leg, it's toeing out essentially, but there isn't really an angle. The whole leg is on sideways. That foal has a very narrow chest, and some of those foals will improve as they mature, but a lot of them don't improve significantly, and certainly in my mind there isn't a suitable surgery. So that foal and the third horse here are the ones for me definitely to stay away from. The others, if they're good on the ground, you can work on it. If they're not, forget it.
So with the likes of not the two catastrophic ones, but the ones that you think would be workable, is there farrier intervention done before they get to you, or is it a case of we leave it grow 3 or 4 months and then we'll bring it to Tom?
So yeah, I think there is farrier intervention. Oftentimes these will come on my radar in maybe from now until January or February. And I always, people have 1 or 2 horses that they think will need intervention, and they're thinking about them every day. And I'm always trying to get them to put them to the back of their minds, at least until the 1st of March. You know, some of the horses that are born in early January, you can start thinking about doing something with them in March. But for me, the preference is to push them to the far end of the spring. And with those, some corrective farrier work is okay, keeping a little bit of foot on the outside of the foot. Sometimes, in severe cases, adding a bit of an extension just to hold them. You probably know that you're not going to correct them. Sometimes you'll be surprised. with how they do, but you're trying to hold them through the spring, not let them deteriorate. And then when they're reaching fairly good body weights, kind of up north of 350 kilos, 400 kilos, then you're thinking about putting a screw in them.
Okay. How long do you leave a screw in for?
So that's fairly subjective. It's a visual assessment. But what I have found is that if you do them in the early part of the spring, the horses are growing slower, so the screw is in for longer. If you do them in, June or July, and you need a bit of stomach, I suppose, as the owner or the person prepping that year, potentially prepping that yearling. If you're doing them at that stage of the year, there is risk. If there's any little bit of a cosmetic complication, it can be a problem and causes a bit of stress for people. But those animals correct quicker. So the screw might be in for somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks at that stage. But generally, in a knee, it's in about 4 weeks. And by doing them later in the year and having the screw in for a shorter period of time, you get less complications. So one of the big complications you'll get from putting a screw in is that you will get a reaction on the other side of the growth plate. So you'll get what's known as a physitis. That can cause the horse to be lame. It can cause the horse to overcorrect. It can cause the horse to revert. But for me, it's related to how long the screw is in place. So that's why I tend to try and push people into the summertime to do them.
And it's quite common practice now, and everybody's familiar with it. Is there any studies done or proven that there is soundness with horses that have screws done? Or is it published, or is it?
There are, and they have looked at it from a racing point of view and also a sales performance point of view. And when you look at something scientifically, the most you can say is that it has no negative impact. And by that, if you wanted to say it had a positive impact, you'll have to get into doing it on tens of thousands of horses. So they've looked at maybe populations of 500 or 600, and it's.
Is that in Europe or North America?
It's most of them are American based. Yeah, there's some. Yeah, mostly American based. And so what they've done is they've compared it to maternal siblings. So they've looked at the performance of the maternal siblings at the sales, performance of the maternal siblings on the track, and they found it equivalent.
Yeah, just from a perspective of durability, there's, everybody whispers, everybody talks, and if one person has a bad experience with it, then they'll talk about that one bad experience, and we're all guilty of doing that. But you wouldn't deter anybody who feels that it might be worth bringing one into you to at least explore the option. It's not a negative.
It's definitely not a negative for me, and this time of the year I will get phone calls. People have put screws in fetlocks. There might be a little bit of a bump. How will that be perceived at a foal sale? And for me, it's much more preferable to have a foal that is what I would consider correct, so that toes out slightly and have maybe a slightly cosmetic blemish than one that is straight or toeing in and never had any intervention. Like if you see that really bad filly that I showed you in the first one, if she had screws as a foal, she'd be certainly and toed out much more likely to be a sound racehorse.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I have to interfere.
Go for
But
it.
what is the advantage? Should we not take the animal out of the breeding? Because at the end, you are misleading the one who is having that horse. That person thinks he has a fine horse, correct and everything. What does he do? He starts breeding with it and gets only crooked foals. So it's a circle where we then continue to operate on these foals only for the sake of that one day. And if it's a stallion, it gets even worse.
I think there's a strong argument to be made that you consider trying to alter the genetics, but you would lose a huge portion of the breeding population. And if you look at the current situation, the amount of horses been produced, you can only increase from the bottom. You can never say let's breed more good horses. Everyone's breeding from good horses, and the majority of the speed type gene that's in horses, it has that tendency for them to want to toe in. So culling them, it just isn't going to happen, and that's not the responsibility of the vets. I don't own them, but nobody's going to.
Is it inherent?
It's partly genetic, yeah, for
it?
sure. Like, as in, if I look at a foal, the first thing I'll also look at is its mother, provided it is its mother. But they will always be the same. And I think probably one of the things that has happened is that we've all maybe lost sight of our selection criteria for breeding a mare. You know, people are they? I don't know. Maybe people can answer this, but are we as do people have the same critique of their stallion selection, the suitability of the mare? Is everything done from the knees up or the waist up, so that they're just saying, it's okay, I'll get the vets to look after it if there's any issues? So I think there's that tendency as well, you know.
Well, it's very tempting if you have a mare and, you know, the brothers after winning the Coventry, it's, you're not going to bin her, are you? You know, whether she's got legs this way or that way, you're going to try your hand.
For sure. So I think in an ideal world, you would take out all these horses that you don't deem suitable, but you would lose. I think ultimately you would lose far more than you'd gain.
Off the correction subject, and please do ask any questions in a minute if you have questions on this topic. Scoping foals is a pet hate of mine. I think foals are only developing, but a lot of people request it. Is it a waste of time? Is it purposeful? Where do you stand on that?
I think, I suppose I'd have to be honest and say I don't have huge experience with at the sales, but what I will say is that a very small percentage, so the published percentages of foals that will have a significant abnormality of their throat, something they were either born with or have developed in the first 6 or 8 or 10 months of their life, is in about 2 to 3% of foals. So they could have, you know, something that is a structural abnormality of their throat, and you want to identify that. So things like a issue with their soft palate, or the cartilages of their throat, they don't function normally, so they won't be able to be a racehorse. And then you will have foals that will have been treated with veterinary medications, then they might have had an intravenous injection that could damage a nerve. There will be 1 or 2 of those that show up every year. So I think that you are trying to rule out those cohort of foals. They're a small number. You might search for a long time and not find one at a sale ground. The other part of it is that when you're scoping them and your interpretation of them, you really have to give that foal the benefit of the doubt. And everybody knows these foals coming and going to a sale, they're stressed, they're tired. Plenty of them will have different you know, transient viruses. They're like little kids, they'll have snotty noses, and the function of their throat changes a bit. So it's very, very hard to judge them. But yeah, I suppose when your money is on the table, you do want to try and protect your investment.
Everyone wants to hedge their bets, but yeah. Is it for, I suppose I'll ask the buyers, do you do it? Do you scope foals?
Yes, ideally I prefer that the foals are scoped before they come to the sales.
So you have it on the door?
Yeah, because at the end, if you are scoping the foal after 3 days showing, yeah, with all the infections going around and everything, you just might get a wrong picture. So I think ideally the foals are done at home.
Well, the vendor doesn't want 27 scopes down it.
Yeah, that's why you should put
either.
in a video scope, yeah, and put in one with a good quality. And then there's no need for most of the potential purchasers to scope these foals. I think it's hard, it's extremely hard on the foals, and it's you know, as Tom said, it's a difficult thing as well. I remember one Galileo filly I really was desperate to buy, and my vet failed her for the scope, and I just wanted to have her, so I asked 3 other vets to scope her. Yeah, so hopefully.
You really wanted her, yeah.
Yes,
we get it.
I really wanted her. Yeah, and so two said it's a low risk, it will work, and 2 said there's no chance.
So you've really used your lifeline in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and got nowhere.
So at the end, I didn't buy her, but I really, because I wanted her so desperately, I followed her and inquired about her, and she was useless because she had a wind issue.
I thought you were going to say she was Lily Langtry or something.
Yes. No. So yeah, I scope. I let them all scope. Ideally, I look at the video scope to avoid the stress for the foals. But if they are not scoped, yes, I will let them scope.
And Paul, do you get your foals x-rayed?
Well, I would like to get them x-rayed, but sometimes there's no x-rays with them, and you kind of run out of time in that. But
They're just becoming more popular now, though. It seems to be more of a request from the purchasers nowadays. The
yeah, but I
vendors are
suppose
catching up.
if you're getting up there north of 70 grand and 80 grand and 100 grand and that, you'd want that bit of reassurance, all right, and I suppose the vendor should have them there really at, if they're expecting that kind of money, because it's very disappointing, like if you come back there in the spring and you have a big problem,
Yeah, and we'll get on to OCDs and all the other issues you might have when you get back to the yearling sales in a moment, but we haven't bought the foal yet, so we have to go back to Alice to buy the foal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you're on sale day, you have your shortlist made. Do you look at scopes and x-rays depending on the budget?
Scopes, yes. Haven't bought one expensive enough for it to be x-rayed yet.
Well,
maybe in the future.
All in principle. So you have your shortlist made, say there's 10 of them going through. Everybody's different, but do you have a value on each foal that you say, that's my ceiling, or how do you approach the day?
Generally speaking, we do, yes, and then we'll go one over it and one again. And then you kind of, it's amazing though, in the heat of an auction, if you're bidding against someone else, you'll spend a lot more than you ever intended to in cold blood.
So like if you look across and you see Philip, right, and you're like,
well, no,
it's a little bit like, back in the day in America, and you see Vincent O'Brien bidding and you're like, well, he's good judge, like.
Yeah, but if it's Philip now, I'm like, right, I better go get a coffee or something.
At least you buy something,
yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. If he wants one, he wants one.
Is that so?
But yeah, you have a fair idea of what you're planning on spending, because you don't want to spend the yearling price on the foal and you don't leave any room for making a profit. You have to be reasonable as well. And then I think you need to consider the costs thereafter. A budget's there for a reason, and you have to spend within your means for the most part. And then you always dream then afterwards of what's going to happen next. But for me, normally if I buy a foal, it happens to be in England because I'm selling here or trying to. And your costs, once the hammer comes down and you've been successful after not being successful.
And then they give you the docket and it's like, do you want to tick this box under £250? Do you want to tick this box? And
exactly,
then all of a sudden you've paid a lot more than you thought.
Exactly, yeah. It's not until you kind of do it yourself that you realize you kind of know the costs are there, plus, but you don't really add it up till it's coming out of your own pocket. So for Newmarket, for example, you're buying in guineas. So that's
which is what, 1.05?
Yeah, I think you divide it by 20 to get the sterling and then take it away. And then your commission on top of that is 5%. Your VAT charged on top of that, so that's charged at your price plus your 5%. Then the VAT is taken on that number. If you're a flat rate farmer, it's 4.8%. If you're not, it's 9%. Then I suppose you better get them home. That's for €440.
Do you insure them to bring them home?
Personally, no, but you can do. That's another plus.
Yep.
And then on top of that, with Brexit, you're another €350 to do your Rapido to get them home with all the extra red tape now. And yeah,
I'm not longer using the North Irish border.
I was going to say maybe you should buy Irish.
Yeah. There was the loophole of going through Belfast there for a while, but they cottoned on to that. But yeah, and that's before you even get them back home. So there's lots of plus that you have to kind of put into the calculator as well. So
you're here, you're at the sale, you're buying. There's a lot of people here wouldn't have the luxury of having the farm at home. And what I mean by the farm at home is not just the land, it's the company for horses. So if you're buying one, should you say, okay, I'm buying a filly, do I need to buy 2 fillies? Is it practical to buy a filly and a colt? Just in terms of simple practicalities for somebody who doesn't have a big farm with a lot of horses.
Yeah, well, I suppose if you're keeping them together, you're going to have to go 2 colts or 2 fillies, realistically, yeah.
Yeah, think bigger. Okay, so Alice is after doing business. Philip, what are you doing? Marion's telling you what to do. What's your routine on sale day? Like, have you all your due diligence done beforehand, or is it last panic saloons?
Yeah.
You've got 4 vets anyway, scoping flat out.
Yeah. Well, that's an exception, yeah. But usually, yes, we when I've done my shortlist, I vet them. As Paul said, the vendors nowadays, I think it's easier. Maybe it has to do with me because they always expect if I vet one, then it will be a little bit more expensive. So anyway, they are normally they are fine and X-ray the foal, or we share it, or something like that, or there might be 2 clients or 3 clients to share it. I'm always complaining about the vet bills because the vet is vetting the foal once, but he's then
doing
selling
it for 4 people.
Yes, and he's selling it 3 times. So I think that's something that has to change, because if we think about all the costs involved, why should we pay, or why should the vet get paid 4 times for something he's doing only 1 time? Yeah.
Is that a deal you need to strike with your own individual vet, though, rather than what can really be done about that?
Yeah, I guess, it's they hand in the report, yeah, because I get then the report sent or whatever, and then the practice sells it on.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit unfair. Anyway, that's a complaint I have for a few years. But usually I X-ray, or have the foals X-rayed as well. Even if it's a lower price foal, because at the end, if you are facing any problems, then latest in the prep, when you are prepping these foals, if they have a chip in the hock and you don't know that, and the hock blows up,
Whose
in
fault
trouble.
is it then? Yeah.
So it's better to know that beforehand, and so.
And out of interest, if you really loved a foal and you saw there was a chip, but it was low risk and you could take it out, your vet is thinking or suggesting to you that won't stop it being a nice yearling, would you take the chance?
Depending where the chip is.
Okay, do you have any examples of ones that have worked out?
If I have examples where it worked out.
As in, have you bought a foal in the past where you're like, I really like the foal, X-rays aren't perfect, but we'll roll the dice?
Yes. You want to have names now?
No, as in,
yes,
did it work out? Did it turn out to be a nice yearling?
Yes, I have done it, and we didn't operate. I have to admit, I'm not a great friend of all these interferences. I think the best is really if you don't have to interfere and the horses can live out as much as possible and develop without any interruption.
Do you have a good farrier?
We have a very good farrier, yeah. I have to admit I'm in a lucky position. We have very good land where, let's say, the horses which have been born on the farm and raised on the farm, we rarely have chips. And with the foals I'm buying, obviously, I don't take too many chances with the chips, but they are, like with epiphysitis and these things, I'm just very lucky that I don't have really a lot of problems with that. With the chips, I have operated on foals. I haven't operated on foals, and I couldn't say even I sold one with chips in book 1, where the vet said, okay, it is a risk. It will be commended by some people, but the people will be forgiving because the horse is good enough, and it's a little bit of on the low risk side. So then I leave them. Yeah. And so I couldn't really say a rule and say, yeah, let operate everything. Ideally, I buy one without chips.
Ideally, we all buy the perfect horse, but it is interesting, the different perspectives. I've grown up in a family where they like to believe that a horse can fix itself naturally with a good farrier to a certain degree. Like, we will all need Tom at some stage, unfortunately, but it is, nature has a big, strong role to play on that. But you have all your due diligence done, your vets are happy, you're in here, you're looking across, and all the place is full up because it's a nice horse. What do you do in terms of, Alice goes 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 bids over her budget? What are you thinking?
Difficult to answer. Sometimes I'm pretty strict and have set my limit, and I don't go above it. Sometimes I get a little bit carried away and spending more, not only 2 or 3 bids more.
Is that just because you're in a good mood? Are you after a nice lunch? What's the difference between the rigid Philip and the...
I can't describe it. It's sometimes, it's just a feeling. It's just, you think then maybe you have valued your horse, or you have valued the foal differently. Maybe you have valued it wrongly, so I increase the value. And sometimes, sometimes I stop. Sometimes I have to stop because
Marion's walked away.
Yeah. No, but you if you're buying, if you take her command, she knows that I rarely give up. It's difficult, so I have to stop with certain foals, because otherwise I get driven all the time. Mm-hmm. We all know that driving is something, especially the Irish, are extremely good in. That's why you have to set your valuation, and whether that's right or not, next year will tell you. But it has not gone too bad.
Next year usually tames us. So the guys are after doing their business, Paul. Some of them are being, Philip's disciplined in one aspect, and in another he's got a gut instinct that he's got the next fantastic moon, which you bred, yes? Well done.
Yes.
And he goes a little bit over budget. What's your routine come sale day? We've all the vetting done, all that's taken care of.
Yeah. Basically, when you've done your short list, is probably fairly short, and you approach the sales that you need foals, and so when I go into a bid on the foal, I go in there kind of fairly positive, but I will stop if if you engage with somebody who's maybe an end user or that, or has limited, or it's Philip Stauffenberg. I'm going to beat him anyway, and that kind of thing. But I do go in there with a positive attitude that I want to buy the foal, because I like the foal and it's ticked the box and it's past the vets, and
you've done a lot of work to get to that stage.
Sorry?
You've done a lot of work to get to that stage.
Yeah, that's right. And you need to get your hands on those nice foals, and so I go in there with a positive attitude. And I remember somebody saying to me one time, I remember I bought a filly there in Newmarket a few years ago, and I probably gave 50 to 70% more than what she was probably worth. But this person said to me, well, sometimes when you go in to sell one, you probably get a few quid more than you were expecting, and that has happened too. So you can expect to,
it balances out.
Yeah, it balances out, and if you want it, you're in against very competitive people, and generally the same people show up for those nice foals, and sometimes it's the last man to blink,
A lot of people in here will be thinking pedigree, sire, mare produce record. Do you have, not a formula, but do you have a preference? Will you go in on a first season horse that you don't know anything about? What do you value in a sire? Do you like a horse that's had 3 solid seasons of running? Or would you prefer a horse that's won A Group 1, has proven brilliance and retired instantly?
Well, first of all, I'm a big confirmation man. I've always been a confirmation man. I've loved looking at animals, good-looking animals, and I like looking at them at home, buying them and getting them home, you know. You mightn't make much money out of them, but at least you're looking at nice animals for 6 or 8 months or 9 months.
That's a big thing, you know, when people say looking at a horse's head. Well, you're going to have to look at that head for a long time. So.
You are, yeah. That reminds me, actually, when I was a kid, I used to, I was only about 9 or 10, but I used to be reading about Vincent O'Brien. And, you know, you'd see him interviewed and he'd be talking about a horse's head. And the genius that I was at 10 years of age, I'd be saying, jeez, what is he talking about? What difference does the horse's head make? But now, 60, 50 years later, it is nearly the first thing I look at when the horse comes out of the stable, and I attach a lot of importance to the head. So Vincent was right and I was wrong, basically.
He knew what he was doing, that
he
man,
knew
yeah.
he knew what he was doing, yeah.
Horse Trader's gone on Audible, by the way. If anybody hasn't read it, you can now listen to it.
Say that again?
You know that brilliant book, Horse Trader?
Oh, yeah.
Probably the best bloodstock book ever written.
Is that the one, the Rob Sangstead one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Robinson.
Yeah. It was out of print, was it?
You can't, it's no longer being printed, but it's on Audible now, so you can listen to it on an audiobook for all of us who don't want to read.
I wouldn't be able for that now.
There's no value in the printed version anymore.
You can read it, but it's like £100 to buy a hard copy these days.
No, I think I actually have it there. It's an antique at this stage.
You're skirting the question of sires, though.
Oh, sires, yeah. Well, look, the business is very sire-driven at the minute.
Of course it is, yeah.
And it probably always has been. So I actually haven't really delved into my catalogues yet, but I am giving the matter of sires a lot of thought. And I don't spend a lot of time in the office at home. I usually out around the yard. But at this time of the year, I do go into the office and I kind of try and kind of think about that a bit, you know, what sires to be kind of focusing on, you know. And like when it's simple enough, I won't say it's simple enough, but like when you look at the results at the top sales, you know, the Bucks One and the Goffs Orby and that, the horses that make the money are the good proven horses. You know, but like you have to pay for them as foals too. So maybe we're
talking a top 5 percentile though. The horses that are making those monies are often homebreds and are often out of reach for the ITBA Next Generation people. So are we? Do you ever believe you've seen, say, the stock of next year's first season sire runners? Do you ever take a chance? Geez, his yearlings were lovely. There's no way they're going to be slow.
Yeah, I do often take that chance. And funny enough, when Marie and I started now, at the very beginning, we were breeding, we were buying fillies, putting them in foal, and, you know, for 5 and 6 and 10 grand and 5 grand in the stallion, and aiming to get 30 grand for those, the progeny. And we were actually selling the cold foals, and we would buy filly foals at the same time. And there was a kind of you could do that time, and you could buy lovely filly foals worth the money. It's not as easy to do that now, and I can understand young people that it's difficult for them to kind of get into the business. And what, you know, Philip and Alice were saying earlier there about partnering up, that's probably a good way of doing it. But you just, I don't make a good partner myself. I'm very uneasy about partnerships myself, personally. But if you have friends that are very like-minded and will work as hard as you, it's probably not a bad way to do it.
So at this juncture, they've all bought a few foals. And I might open up the floor for a few questions, because after this, we're going to go forward to yearling prep and trying to make the profit. So I think Joan is out there somewhere with a roaming microphone, and I'd love if somebody had a few questions for her or for the panel, because I'm all for leaving questions till the end, but usually people want to go home or they get bored or they forget the question they wanted to ask. So does anybody have a question they want to ask? Don't be shy. Lovely. Over there, wherever Joan is with the microphone.
it's actually a question for Tom. So you were showing the second foal that you described as a perfect candidate for putting a screw in. Now, you said that most likely over time it would develop to be correct. Would you still consider it ethical to, just for the sake of the sales and making a higher sales price, to be correcting and interfering with that foal's development by putting in a screw when it would develop on its own perfectly fine?
Between yourself and Philip, no, I'm not going to get much.
Tom, that's my daughter.
Careful now.
I have 4 kids. I don't know what I'm going to do. I suppose it's a conversation to have, yeah, to think about it. I think from my experience of doing many hundreds and thousands of them, it's a relatively benign procedure for the animal. It's very well tolerated, and it doesn't have long-term consequences, I suppose. So yeah, I'm comfortable with it, yeah.
But does it have any like medical benefits in and of itself for the horse for it to be corrected that way? Or is it just for a higher sales price?
I think it has. I think for when you take any individual by themselves, it potentially not. But if you look at it as a population, if I see 20 yearlings like that, and I might say, yeah, look, I think this is a horse that you're meeting him at a stage of his life where he's immature and he might improve by himself if he was given enough time. For every 2 of those, there might be 1 that won't, you know, and those horses, invariably we see them back. Horses that toe in, that are varus through their knees, so their knees push out and they're towing in their fetlocks, those horses go on to, and it is scientifically proven, to have more injuries on the racetrack. So I think across the population, yeah, I think you're hopefully preventing the amount of wastage and yeah, by surgical intervention. Yeah.
Thank you.
Interesting question. Well done. Anybody else want to follow up on something? We have a hand over here.
Give me 1 second there, Donica.
Come on now, Joan. Snap, snap.
Or else just shout.
She's from a jumping background, but that's even a stretch for a tyner, I'd imagine.
A question for Tom and for the rest of the panel. It's going to screws. Do you think they should be declarable, or they should have to be declared when they go to the sale, from your point of view? And then from buyer's point of view, if they were declared, how much would it affect your buying of a foal?
So that question comes up on many things that I'm involved with on surgery on foals or yearlings. Do they need to be declared? And I think the majority of vets would think this way, that if something is going to have the potential to impact that horse in the future, then it's significant, and that's how you vet a horse. You know, I can write down this horse has white legs, but do I think it's going to impact it in the future? It's irrelevant. So things that I think need to be declared are major surgery, and for me, any surgery of the airway or any abdominal surgery of like colic, those horses we know have a tendency to have issues with further colic. But removing for placing screws and things like that, not for me. We don't see it as being a problem down the line that it comes back against a horse. So I don't think it needs to be declared, for me anyway.
I completely disagree.
Boom.
Completely disagree.
That's why we sat them over there.
I think it's one of those, there's always a borderline. But at the end, buying and selling is something of trust. And if you don't tell me as a vendor, when I ask the question, if I don't ask the question, it's a different thing. But if I ask the question and you don't tell it to me, and then I look at the x-rays and I see there was a screw in, you're off the list. I would not come back. because at the end, if I'm asking you a question and you don't tell me the truth, why should I come back to you? Will you tell me the truth and other things?
Well, that's about building your brand and your reputation, and that is a bit like maybe selling a horse for a loss, but it turning out to be a good horse. In the long term, it'll pay you dividends. If you plan on being in a pool for a short period of time, by all means, but you only get a chance to make or burn your reputation once. You take a lifetime to make it. Anybody else got a question before we move on?
So, Philip, just where do you draw the line with,
Just tell the truth. If I ask you the question, just tell the truth as a vendor.
But do you want the full medical history of that animal, or?
If I ask a question, if that horse had surgery or if there was any operation, I would like to know if it was there or not. I can make myself then, or judge myself if I want to go for it or not. But I would like to know the truth. And the same on the other side. If I get asked, I don't want to lie. So I tell people what's there, what they can't see. And that's the thing, like you have interfered with an animal and it's something you might not be able to see from the outside. Yeah, because there are no white hairs, or maybe you have put some color. You have some color in, or whatever. So I think it's just for the whole business. And if you think about going forward where that business is going to, I think if we don't tell the truth, I think we will lose customers. And that's why I think it's important.
But say go back to a foal was sick, say it had pneumonia. I would hate to buy a foal that had terrible rhodococcus as a foal, but is that information interesting to you, or you're?
But he's not asking that question. You're not realistically going to ask that, are you?
If the foal had rhodococcus.
Well, if you have any suspicion about a horse's conformation as whatever, you're going to say, oh, was there a little bit of manipulation there? That's the kind of question I'm presuming you ask.
Well, if the foal has certain signs which are obvious that the foal was not well all his life, then obviously I would ask a question. And I think it is important. Again, we know all these stories about foals who were extremely ill and were fantastic racehorses at the end. But there are more stories where the foals were not well and they just continued with problems through the whole process. And so that's, yes, I would ask a question. If there's a query with the foal, I would ask a question. And I would expect that I get an answer.
Satisfied?
Yeah.
We have the yearling bought. It comes home. It doesn't go out in the field because it's December. Alice, what's the routine?
So when you first get them home, you want to make sure they've no vices
Yeah,
or anything.
that's a big thing. Don't throw them into a shed.
Yeah, exactly. Don't put them in a loose barn. And then you'll get a surprise when you bring them in for prep. But yeah, we'd, between my dad, my mum and my brother, we'd Pinhook a good few. So they'd come home into boxes for 7 days just to make sure that they're not going to crib, they're not going to windsuck, they're not going to weave, box walk, any of those things that you don't like to see when you get them home. A lot of them pick up, as was mentioned earlier, little small viruses. They might be a little bit under the weather, so you check temps if they're a bit slow on feed and that kind of thing. Just do your general husbandry. But once that's done, we try get them out as soon as is possible. At home, what we do, we have big loose American barns that are bedded down with straw. They go out in groups of Fillies, colts obviously keep separate, and then they're out during the day and in the loose barns by night, and we do that the whole way through the winter. So we found it's brings down the labor intensity of having to muck them out every day, and they're farmed quite organically, I'd say. They're handled for vaccinations, wormers, farrier, but outside of that, they're fed twice a day, and they're very much in a herd, run in, run out to the barn, and they're very happy doing that. And then ours, once the weather changes, then they go out to full paddocks full time, and then they don't come in till it's time for prep. So that's kind of how we do it. It's different in everywhere you go.
When they're in such a loose environment, how do you keep an eye on their feet, their conformation, if they need attention, individual attention?
Well, that's again where I'm very lucky. My dad and my brother are very sharp on those sort of things. And you would also, you keep a note every time the farrier comes, we pull that out near 4, or we pull that in, or it's normally pull out. But so you'd kind of have your certain ones that would be seen by the farrier more frequently than others. And then if you've some that start getting a bit heavy, when they start getting a bit too heavy, that's when the knees start going. And when they broaden out through their shoulders, that's when they're starting to come in. And that's when, well, hopefully we get it in time, but you might have to contact Tom. But yeah, you have to work closely with your farrier. You have to watch your nutrition, what you're giving them. And then we would have, every year we have another barn for the ones that you'd give smaller rations to keep them lighter, so that they're not putting that pressure on their knees, and the farrier would go to them more frequently, I suppose.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you lead on to Tom, because not every horse is going to go straight from the barn into prep seamlessly, or you get to prep and you realise, oh geez, I should have rang him months ago. Talk to us about OCDs and the nightmare that they can be.
Go on the way, actually. So I suppose there'll be two parts to it. I think the foals will be potentially x-rayed at a sale, and I've just kind of given what I think is fairly general advice, that fetlocks, for the most part, they're acceptable and manageable, and if anything needs to be done with them, it's easy, do it. Knees are different. Extreme caution with a knee. If you've any radiographic issues with a knee at the time of purchase, hocks are generally okay. They can be cleaned up, or those fragments can be removed if they're driving a clinical effusion of the hock. And the next one then, stifles. You'd want to be pretty cautious with a stifle, but there are ways to intervene and try and change that disease process if possible. So I think there are two parts. So the majority of places, depending on the value of the animal, a lot of animals will be screened in the springtime. I think one of the things that I've observed over the years, if you have a farm that is breeding and then also pinhooking, more times than not, it's the horses that pinhook that will develop problems. And I think the horse that's pinhooked, they're under more pressure for most of their life than the horse that is bred and kept until it's in the same place until it's a yearling. So
well, is that because it's gone through foal prep, maybe as an immature foal?
Yeah, I think it's been prepped for a foal sale. It could be prepped away from the farm that it was born on, and it will have a bigger or higher plane of nutrition potentially for that period of the sale. There's the stress of going to a sale, the stress of coming back from a sale and going to a new management system. So I think there are lots of changes, and I suppose the overall message of that is, I think if you want to avoid problems or minimize problems, anything we do with horses is consistency. Try and let change happen as gradually as you can.
And you say you do screenings in the spring, or your clients do screenings in the spring. Is that just full set of x-rays?
It is a full set of x-rays, yeah. So it's a screening. You're looking for any potential issues, and there are two parts to that. One is you might see something that, depending on the horse, depending on where they're going, depending on the client's preference, that needs to be addressed. And by that I mean like a fragment in a hock or in a fetlock or in the stifle that might need to be removed. Or it might flag something up to you that you need to come back in at the end of the springtime when there's been a growth change and monitor the horse. And I suppose depending on the type of horse and where that horse is going, if it's a book one type horse, there is probably, and certainly saw a lot of issues with knees in horses this year, and I think there is probably potential for those horses to be x-rayed before they start prep. You know, if you see a horse that has a issue with a sesamoid or issue with potentially a little issue with a knee or the chance that it's going to get worse, modifying your prep if possible that it's not all as intensive for that horse might benefit you. There's nothing worse than you screen them in the springtime. They're your star for the upcoming autumn sales, and then you prep them and then you get them to the sale or close to the sale and there's an issue. It might inform you to temper it a bit. But the other thing that, and I'll just go forward here. So on this screen there's a knee up in the top left-hand corner that's a little bit sharp, and that would be one that you'd want to review in the early part of the summer. There's a horse with a bad sesamoid. Again, you'd want to alter your prep for that horse.
Just for our mere brains, can you tell us what's sharp about this knee up top left?
Is there a pointer on this thing? Yeah. The big button in the middle.
There is, yeah.
Is it on the screen?
Yep.
Bad at being colorblind. Oh yeah. So here I'll have to point because I can't see the thing. But just here, it's a little bit sharp. And what'll happen with that is it potentially will get worse as the prep is intense or intensifies, and it could also chip. I had a yearling that chipped its knee in prep, and you know, you want those horses big and strong and bulky, and their joints are under potentially a bit more pressure. So that horse, if I saw that in February, I'd be saying, here, you want to check this again in May or June, and then let that dictate your prep or your management.
What could you do?
Not a whole pile, to be honest. With a knee, you're under pressure with a knee. The last thing you want to do, and that's why I would say it as high risk, is if you get into a knee and you put the camera in there, you're trying to remove that little bone spur. The body's response is to create another bone spur. So you will be up against it, but it might dictate your prep. It might dictate sometimes your sale entry, where you're going. And I will always say that. So I'll have yearlings that I will end up removing stifle OCDs on. This is a very small one at the bottom in the springtime. But I will always advise on the discharge notes, whether people do it or not is another thing, but to x-ray that yearling before you finalize your sales dates. So what you know, if you have a big lesion where a stifle OCD was removed, you mightn't be heading to book one anymore. You might have to reassess where you're going and downgrade that horse a bit. So there's lots that can be done. I think one of the things we will see, and we'll see it from now on, and we'll see it some of these foals that are in prep, is the development of stifle OCDs. And these foals often become pretty lame. And you see that little shadow that's coming on it. That foal will be lame and beginning to get an effusion. And you know, to do anything with that, you have to kind of lock the horse up, reduce their nutrition, put them on joint supplements, and try and get that to heal. Invariably, many of them don't heal, and you go in and remove that fragment that's over on the top right, and you're left.
If you were going to, your September yearling sale, when do you address an OCD?
So it depends. It depends on the horse. So ideally, when they're 12 to 15 months of age, but that can, sometimes that will place you in the middle of the spring. It might place you in the middle of April and May, and that's less than ideal. So sometimes, depending on what it is, you'll do it a little earlier in the spring. If you think that it could mature or could heal a little bit more, you might do it later. And there'll be plenty of horses that I'll do across the summer with the view to getting to a sale. One of the things that we've been trying to do, or I've been doing with some of the stifles, is doing a procedure to try and get the OCD to heal. So if you rock up at a yearling sale with a a big hole on a stifle where an OCD has been removed, it'll be fairly heavily discounted. But we've been doing some surgeries on yearlings, or on weanlings really. So if you see them at sort of between 6 and 12 months, instead of telling that client, lock them up in the stall, do nothing, come back to me in 6 months, at which time the animal has turned physically into quite a poor specimen, they'll get weak behind and generally lose their action. But if you intervene at kind of when it's clinical, when you see it, so hopefully this side of the new year, you can pin those and get them to heal. And I think you're doing the animal a huge service by doing that.
This is your pin.
That's the pin, yeah, and it's only 2 millimeters in diameter. It's called a chondral dart, and it's 18 millimeters long. It's made out of an absorbable plastic, and you can see the holes. I can't use that bloody pointer, but you can see the holes in the bone on the film beside it. It's clear plastic. You can't see it very well, and then this is the lesion as it heals. So on the bottom row of X-rays, on the left is the first one. When the procedure was done, and then over on the right is when the procedure, or is maybe 3 months after the procedure was done. So you really are helping that horse. You're allowing them to hopefully have return to soundness. But it is about early identification, and the reason I bring it up is that the tendency is to screen in the springtime, so in February and March. But for the high value horses, screening them probably just maybe their stifles before Christmas and this time of the year is probably worth considering, because if you do it too late, you won't get the same result. They won't heal. And then the last thing just on this is these subchondral bone cysts. If you have a horse that develops a subchondral bone cyst, usually you're looking at your investment going up in smoke. And a bunch of different things have been tried over the years, namely injecting that lesion with a corticosteroid. That returns the horse to soundness, but there's still a big hole on an X-ray. Then they came up with doing this, treating it like a fracture, so putting a screw across it. But there's a big screw on the X-ray. And then more recently, this has been developed, where we put an absorbable screw into the cyst. And that's has a huge impact on one, restoring a horse to soundness that's otherwise lame, and secondly, getting it to fill in radiographically. So it's filling in with what we would consider healthy cortical bone. And there's an example of a horse I did early this year, and it sold at a yearling sale. So there's a huge change, and I'm sure you can all see that. Sorry, I can't do this thing. This is where the cyst is here, and then it's quite filled in, and there's just a small shallow lucency, or a little divot there. So, yeah, I think Philip will say otherwise. He wants to put me out of business, but
I was actually thinking of his daughter up there singing Jesus.
Yeah, anyway, I go back. Yeah, so, but
that's worst case scenario. We hope none of that happens, but it's a reality for a lot of horses.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, there'll be, I suppose, somewhere probably around 10% of a population of horses will have OCDs of some description. Yeah, and
10%, just 10%. Sorry, not just 10%, but on 10%. Is that increasing over time? Is that a reflection of the breed? Why is it? Is it just better diagnosis?
I think so. I think when I vet for 17 years, when I started, radiographs and digital radiology it came on stream maybe 2 or 3 years after it. So I think it's, it'll be a while before we say it's increasing or decreasing. But yeah, I think there's more vigilance for it. People are, more interested to see whether they're there or not. Yeah.
Give it 50 years, Paul. The technology will be so good that no horse will pass. What's your routine when they come home?
What's my routine, Rich? When they come home.
They're home, they're in sheds, they're out in the field, whatever you want. You know what a big question is nutrition and diet, and we all want to do what's right by our horses by feeding them, but we can actually be cruel to be kind by overfeeding them. You can blow their joints, you can do a lot of things wrong when you're thinking you're doing the right thing.
You can, but I suppose you learn by experience, and it takes years to get to that point. So I always like to have my horses looking healthy, no matter what time of the year it is, that there's a kind of a warm glow off them. I don't like them too heavy at any time really, but when they get to the sales, I want them looking strong and well. But, you know, after we buy them, or, you know, through the winter and that, we like to kind of just keep them warm looking, healthy looking, a good glow off them, but not a lot of condition, not excessive condition on them. And we like to kind of keep them moving as much as possible. I think that's very good for their development. Not easy to do that sometimes, especially with the weather, particularly the way it is at the moment, you know, keeping them out and that. But I'd say the more natural an environment you can keep them in, the better, and the more you can get them moving, and they don't have to be galloping flat out, but just moving around in the paddocks and that, not being overfed. So our routine, I suppose, when we buy them, the first thing I do is actually put cribbocks in their tail and their mane, because the last thing you want is them arriving off the box and you know, a tail gone. It's a disaster. It's one of my pet hates. And now actually
we're talking about OCDs and pinning, and we're talking about tails.
Well, I'm trying to keep out of the controversy here, so so I thought I'd, you know, get onto the old cribbocks and tails and all that.
We can save the
stuff.
tail. We can all see a tail.
So yeah, actually a bit now, you know, going into the old OCD thing and that, and I think Philip touched on it as well. We find that the most of the problems that we have are with foals that are bought, and we have relatively little problems with the ones we've raised. And that's probably why is that? I suppose our land is, we're kind of happy with our land, and with the program we put them on from the time they're born and even before they're born. But definitely I would say, anecdotally, you know, the foals or the yearlings that present the problems are ones that we buy.
How do you monitor them? You know, Tom is suggesting we screen them in the spring. Do you do that? What's your...
Yeah, I think nearly everybody does that. Like if you're aiming for sales where you're going to require a set of X-rays, you have to screen them in the spring, you know. And you know, some of them will need a surgery, hopefully very few, but some of them will. And, you know, I don't think it's too big a deal to the horse. It doesn't set them back too much. You know, if you follow the instructions, the veterinary advice, you know, you get on with it and you do it, and we always try to kind of do them quite early, like February time, so that we always like to have the yearlings out in grass for the May grass, which I think is the best grass, and it's important that they get that, you know. So that's just the way we do it.
I thought you just wanted to have all the jobs done so you could watch Cheltenham.
No.
Know your audience. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're doing all that in the spring. You pencil them in for what sales you want to go to. How far pre-sale do you bring them in and get them into their prep?
Into the prep. Yeah, so we kind of religiously stick to a 10-week prep. So basically we know what day the sale is starting, and we count back 7 days from that, because that's when they leave if they're going to England. And then we count back 70 days from that, 10 weeks. And that's the day they come in for the start of their prep. And we don't deviate from that, regardless of the weather, regardless of what the kids are doing at pony clubs or any of that carry on. We just stick to that, because we find that if you don't do that and you say, oh, the weather is going to leave them out, you'll actually run into problems at the other end. You'll run out of time. So there's enough pressure on without creating pressure for yourself. Yeah.
You mentioned 7 days out because you take them to England.
Yeah.
Why do you sell in England?
I love that sterling.
Guinea's even better, is it?
Sorry?
Guinea's is even better. It's higher,
yeah,
is it?
There you go again, yeah. I didn't forget about that, but you're right.
I'm sure Marinos, yeah.
Yeah.
But then you're adding on costs, so there is other side to it.
You are adding on costs, yeah, but I believe that if you're going to the bigger sales in England, you're oftentimes you're trying to sell to very wealthy people, and I don't think they really look up at the board to see how much is that in euros or how much is that in dirhams, or they just get on with it really.
Do you think if you had a batash that it would make that the people come to where the horses are?
Say that again.
If you have a batash, and like you always said he was special, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't be Einstein to see an amazing horse.
Yeah.
The money will follow the horse, no?
I don't understand.
In terms of if that horse goes to Arcana Deauville, or it comes to Goffs Orby, or it goes to Tatsbook 1, that the horse will make its value because of its prowess.
It probably will. It probably will, yeah. Like basically, the buyers are very good at finding the nice horses, and but like still, the
it's your routine. That's what you do, and you're happy with that.
Yeah, it is absolutely. Yeah.
So you're 10 weeks out, right, Philip? Yeah. Are you 10 weeks out before you bring them into routine, or what's the 55 quid a day routine?
Obviously, when the foals are bought, if you go back to that, there are a few days, if I buy them here, there are a few days at Abbeville farm where, I have a longer relationship. So they have to check for me if there are box walkers or any.
Yeah, you don't want them back in Germany before you realize there's a problem.
Yes, that's too long, and the same is with a farm in England. So we keep them for a few days there, just checking them, and then we take them all home to the farm. On the farm, we try to get them out as soon as possible. Out means day and night. So we bring all the foals, whether that are pinhooks or homebreds, we bring them in at least 3 days in the week for just for 2 or 3 hours, just for feeding, checking, and just keep them in the routine with the stables, keep them hand walking, assess them on the ground if there are anything we have to do with extensions or corrections. And that's going the whole winter. So they probably are in at night maybe for 3 or 4 nights when the weather is really terrible, but mainly out. And then depending to which sale we go, it's like if we are selling obviously a few in Baden-Baden as well, which is a very early sale, and it's not a Doncaster type horse we are selling there, so it's a later maturing horse which we usually sell in Baden-Baden. So that means they get a little bit of an easier prep and get only we bring them in 10 weeks before, but we start them then prepping 9 to 8 weeks before we go to Baden-Baden.
That's interesting. So you say you're bringing a late maturing type to Baden-Baden, but it's your earliest sale. Is that just because you know your audience? Is that just because you know the end purchaser is more likely to buy that type of a horse at that sale?
No, it's obviously the main number of horses go to mainly England from us. We have prepped horses for Goffs, 1 or 2 per year, but had them in consignment. So this year we consigned for the first time ourselves at Goffs. Goffs is, for me, I have to admit, that is a little bit of a challenge from the logistics, because traveling now with the Brexit through England is a little bit more complicated than it was before. So mainly the horses go to Newmarket. It's easier. We are selling a few in Baden-Baden. That's mainly for clients or homebreds which are not good enough to go to one of the select sales. We have tried Arcana as well. with mixed success.
Go on.
Yeah, Arcana is quite. It's quite interesting. If you look into the pinhooking results at Arcana, there's the majority is making a good profit, but you have to get it right. And the French are a little bit, I would say, like the Germans. They are not really keen to give you a profit. I always say in England or in Ireland, if your horse, if you have bought it for whatever price and your horse looks well and walks well and you have done a good job, you get paid. In France and in Germany it's even worse. They might give you 5 more than you have paid.
Really? Even if they really want the horse, they're like,
Yes.
it only costs them 20.
It's in the nature of the Germans, I think. They're always jealous to give somebody a good profit.
There's honesty.
Very, very difficult. And it's a little bit in France as well. And obviously in France, the premiums play a major role. And so if you are not really at the top end, then it's difficult. So like, consigning in France, and then you have people like Roger, who's just passing your boxes, not even looking at the horses. And that's not the only one. It's like it happens a lot. So it makes it difficult, really, because you are limiting your market. And like last year, I had three yearlings in Arcana in the August sale. Couldn't sell one in the ring, sold them all privately. Afterwards, 2 of them are group horses, so they were not bad horses, but just I couldn't sell them. And so that's why I'm a little bit more careful with Arcana.
Yeah, priorities are wrong. You should
So
want the horse.
but the prep is like the horses come in through the whole year, these 3 or 4 times a week, and then we have them in when we go to England or Goffs, or we have them in for 12 weeks. At the first time, first 1 week or 10 days, we don't do anything with them, just let them in for a few more hours. And that might be a little bit different to most of the ones who are prepping yearlings. We have them out at night until usually the first week of September. So they come in the morning. The colts are in single paddocks, and the fillies are in groups of 2 or 3, or maybe 4. It just depends how they come together. And but they stay out until that time overnight. And then when it gets colder in the nights, then we bring them in overnight, but they still get turned out, at least 4 to 5 hours during the day, during midday. So I like to try to keep them as much time outside.
Keep it natural.
Yes, as possible, which is obviously quite labor intensive. It's, I have always a few Irish guys or English now, and not anymore because they need a visa to come to Germany to work for, but there are still some Irish guys. So if they last in Germany for longer than maybe 2 weeks.
Are you challenging some people?
Yeah, no, it's unfortunately it's quite difficult to persuade young Irish to come to Germany because they all think it's so expensive.
Really? Germany? Have you
Yeah,
been to
but
Dublin?
life is much more cheaper in Germany than here in Ireland. Anyway, so they earn more money in Germany compared to what they earn here. Yeah, but that's a different subject. So I think just from a temperamental point of view, it's very important. Like we lead even the colts and everything. We lead them in at the head colors more or less until maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the sales, when they really get, they are in overnight and less outside. But I find it just so much easier from the handling of the horse. But obviously, you have to take the horses much more often into hand and do your little jobs with them, and that makes it just more expensive to produce them for the yearling sales. But I like to build them up really slowly, so it's a combination of horse walker, launching, and hand walking. What I do in the horse walker, which might surprise a few, I have a sand service in the walker. The walker is pretty big, so I trot them.
How many horses does the walker take?
There are 6, but it's a 25-meter walker.
So they trot on rubber?
No, on sand.
Huh.
There's no rubber, there's sand. So again, it makes a little bit more work, but the surface is very good. So it's a different mixture of sand in the horse walker than in the lunge ring. And so after every second or third lot, depending how many horses are on the walker, I harrow, just get a new surface, proper surface in again. So it's a little bit of intensive work with them, but I find it much better to trot the yearlings on the walker instead of only walking. It's for the temperaments, changing the speed, just keep them a little bit entertained, so they have always they walk in one direction for maximum 5 to 6 minutes, and then I turn, or I change the speed in between, walking speed, trotting speed, everything, just to keep them entertained and that they don't get into
I'm kind of smiling
routine.
because, you know, if we did that at our walker at home, horses would not be sound coming off it. It's different because everybody's walker is going to be tighter or wider, you know. Obviously it works for your surface and your circumference, but
Yes,
I wouldn't be advising that everybody goes trotting horses on the walker.
No, you can't, obviously you can't when you have the rubber mats in, you can't, but if you think about, you know, like the joints of these young horses, that's why I hate these rubber mats personally, because on the rubber mats they just don't slide, so if they walk all the time in the same direction and on a tight turn, it's quite hard on the joints, and on the sandy surface it's just smoother, bigger circle. Obviously the walker is more expensive, but it's just better for the health of every horse, and so
that's your way of doing it.
Yeah.
Interesting. And how on average every year, how many yearlings would you prep?
As I'm getting older, the number's dropping.
But the quality is going here.
It's I normally between 20 and 25.
Interesting. Okay.
But I can't, like you know, if I talk to some of my competitors, they are laughing how many staff we have to do that, because it's just a lot. It's a lot more work to bring them in, bring them out. We don't like. The normal routine is that the horses go on the walker, go on the launch ring, one after each other, and I just I give them a break in between. So they go on the walker, they get hand walked, then they go in the boxes, then they go out for lunching, then they go back in the boxes, always tacked and everything. Then they go out, like in the last few weeks before the sales, they go out in the paddock. Then they come in and then do show practice and everything in the afternoon. So it's
very labor intensive.
Very labor intensive. Yeah.
Interesting. So how are you going to tell us how much staff you have for 25 horses?
Usually 8 to 9.
Privileged. Irish people, get to Germany. Alice, you're at the sales. Kildare Stud have lovely flower boxes. Big pink banners. You can't miss them. You can't walk past because Roger will pull you across anyway.
That's it.
Talk to us about the week itself, or even the build up to the day itself. You've got cards, you've got, you know, the best showing you can do. What are the little things that make a difference for any yearling at any level, just to do it right?
Yeah, exactly. I think having good people is a huge thing. And sometimes we actually find, like you see a lot of the ads for yearling staff and they say, you know, must have experience with yearling prep. Sometimes we find that can be a bad thing. If you've got someone who has no habits at all, they have no bad habits. Whereas if
Well,
you
you
get
can
someone,
give them yours.
exactly, we have plenty. So we almost prefer to have someone who's enthusiastic, keen, and we'll give them the habits and hopefully ones that'll suit us. Because every place you go, what I learned is they do things slightly differently, even if on the outside or the end product is similar to your neighbour or whatever. The way of getting there can be slightly differently. Even in each team, how they show a horse, where you hold your shank or whatever, can be slightly different, and what works in one team won't work in another. So we have a kind of, well, this year in particular, a really good team of showing people. We've a girl there who comes to all of our sales. She doesn't work on the farm, but she greets our horses at every sale, which is really important for us because we're present at every kind of major European sale. Rod will go to most of the sales and I'll kind of stay back at home until the bigger sales. But to have her there greeting the horses, and she kind of sets the tone for whoever we have at the sales, because with the nature of it, we have a lot of staff that stay at home, and then we have staff that meet us at the sales. And for her to be there to meet the horses and be like, this is the bar, that's where we're doing it at. Because if you can have a team that can, every time they show a horse, they're showing it as though this is the show, it makes a huge difference, we feel.
Yeah, because you want the person showing the horse to show it as if it's theirs.
100%.
And you get there and you have whatever, depending on whatever horse you have, the number of looks you have. How important are cards, and can you overread them?
Yeah, cards is a relatively new thing that Kildare are trying to bring in, and it's more, at the moment we're using it more to make efficient what we're getting out for people and to make sure they get what they ask for, rather than saying, was it all the colts you wanted to see? Or, you know, and when they're in the middle of looking at something, being like, and did you want the second days as well? It looks a bit kind of sloppy. But if you've got 5 shows going on, it can happen if it's all in your head. So at the minute, we're using cards just for making sure people get what they ask for, and we're nearly in the evenings getting rid of them, whereas we need to get better at then translating those cards into he came back for that horse and he's on the same team as that guy, so that counts as 3 shows, which might in a busy showing day go unnoticed. Rather, like if you go back and look at it, then you can kind of make more sense of what happened in the rush of the showing frenzy, I suppose.
Funnily enough, I think you're doing okay with or without your sloppy cards. Obviously everybody will interpret them differently. Paul, you've been at the business a very long time. When you get to sales day, what are the key things for you when you're obviously meeting your clients, seeing your horse perform? The price of what you paid 8 or 10 months ago is now irrelevant. It's about what happens that week.
Yeah. The most important thing is when the horse comes out of the stable, he has to walk. Hugely important. And it's a thing that I learned over the years, and I can't overemphasize it enough. And I concentrate a lot on it in all aspects, everything we do, whether it is buying a filly to cover, so that we'll be selling her yearling down the line, or buying a foal. I never buy a foal that doesn't walk well. And then right through the prep, I'm always watching them for the walk. And the very good horses, you don't have to kind of worry too much about them. We have a similar system actually to Philip in that ours go out in the paddock Now, his go out by night, ours go out by day. So after their exercise, they go out in the paddock, and then at the beginning of the prep, they're out for most of the day, actually, and then as they get closer to sales, the time is less. But when they're coming in from the paddock every day, I make it my business not to lead a horse myself, but I always stand there and look at them coming in. And the very good ones, oftentimes you just look at them and they're walking, yeah, he's grand, he's grand, he's grand. And then you'll see a fella that's not walking as well as you would like. And that's the fella you've got to kind of get stuck into, concentrate on, and get him to do it the optimum at the sales, you know. And so actually when we go to the sales then, they've got to be walking, and a lot of what we do is actually we lunge all our horses at the sales, and we give them a lot of hand walking at the sales. Probably more so, we don't give them a lot of hand walking at home, funny enough, but we give them a lot of hand walking at the sales, out in the exercise, lunging first, then out in the exercise arenas, and then in front of the stables where they'll be showing. And we practice that so that by the time the people come to look at them for the first time, they're well into that routine. They know
crucial.
Exactly.
First impressions.
Absolutely.
You don't want your first person to come see your horse could be the end purchaser you need in the ring.
Yeah. It's actually a nervous time, but we kind of have this routine now where we, as I said, we lunge them, we walk them out in the exercise areas. They get a lot of it now for the first few days. They've got to get their heads down, be totally happy in their environment, and then you'll have an idea before you go to the sales who will be showing what horses. Sometimes on the basis of size, sometimes on the basis of the personality of the horse. They might go better with a very quiet person, or then you might need big strong colt. You might need a good strong man and that, or good strong girl for all that matter. Doesn't really matter. But so there might be a couple of little switches to make. So, and then you're obviously looking at them, that they're walking correctly and all that. But I couldn't overemphasize the walk. I mean, it's just, you can just see when the horses come out of the stable and you have that big walk, you can just see the people falling in love with them. And by the same token, if you don't have
Goes the other way, yeah.
You just know you're out of business.
Except of Amanda Skiffington. She always wants to have them standing first.
Correct. So I always tell my staff, especially the new ones, there are two people that you don't walk. John Moore and Amanda Skiffington. So park up your horse for them.
Two very important buyers, so don't get it wrong.
Well, you get to know these things the hard way normally over the years, so.
So Tom, if the guys' horses are walking fabulously, then you're going to... Do you vet many horses at sales? I did see you at Tattersalls Newmarket this year. You just went for the nose? Okay, so we won't be relying on you then to... If Tom's coming down to you, he's only coming down for the look. Interesting. Okay, well, we're coming up to... I'm very aware of the time. So we're at the sales. Things hopefully go well for everybody in the audience, but we're coming back to this time in 20 days, and you basically, the day you buy is the day you sell. Is that fair?
That is, yeah. I heard that many, many years ago, and it took me a couple of years to figure out what they were talking about, to be honest with you. But basically, I suppose it means you've got to buy a nice... It doesn't mean don't expect miracles. You've got to buy a nice foal to end up with a nice yearling, basically.
Don't make it want to transform.
Yeah, well, they usually transform the wrong way, the ones I buy, so...
So the big thing is, what is the number one piece of advice, maybe down through the years, that you guys have got that you would like to pass on, or something that you value above all else?
I don't know that. Like I've got great advice from a lot of people, and kind of, I was always asking people various things, and I can remember people giving me very good advice. I remember Seamus Burns now in particular. He gave me very good advice, and there were other people as well. People I worked for as well, Liam Cashman and Alan Lillingston and all those people. Yeah. So what's The most important thing.
The most important thing is that it's your own judgment, I'd imagine. You know, you can ask, so in all walks of life, whether you're setting up a business or you're going into a job interview, you can ask all these pieces of advice, but ultimately it's your money, it's your judgment. Is that fair?
It is. And there's an awful lot of young people in the audience here, and I remember being a young person and been very unsure of myself, you know, and second guessing myself with the sales, which is probably a good thing because it makes you cautious and it makes you on the ball. But the confidence does come over the years with the experience in that, you know.
Trying to find the next Batash.
Trying to find the next Batash is right, yeah.
Same question, Mr. Fantastic Moon. What's the best horse you pinhooked? What's the best horse you pinhooked? Not bred, pinhooked.
The best horse money-wise or the best horse racehorse-wise?
Performance-wise.
Performance-wise, difficult question. I think, well, she's not a stakes winner, but I think what she has done is Flora of Bermuda.
Oh, yeah.
I bought her here. I know my whole team didn't like her. She looked like a little rat. What I didn't know, and that's really an issue. She was born on the 15th of June, opposite to what was stated in the catalogue.
What was stated in the catalogue?
Yes.
What was stated in the catalogue?
It was a May foal.
Okay.
Yeah. No, 29th of April, 30th of April, but was born on the 15th of June. And what she has gone through, and then being sixth in the Queen Mary, she won her side. She won the race on her side. Unfortunately, she was on the wrong side. And she finished 3 or 4 times now, second or third in a group race. So I just admire her. So maybe that's the best one.
Well, that also, before we wrap up, is bringing up my next question, the June foal versus the January foal. As a breeder, I hate a January foal because they're a nightmare. You have to lock them in a box, and if you don't have a shed for them, and they don't see grass for quite a long time. Is it all it's cracked up to be? I know we all love to come to the sales and have this massive foal that looks like a yearling, but do you get crucified then if you have a late foal?
Yes and no. I think buying a May foal comes with its risks because they can go through a huge spurt of compensatory growth when you do buy them. You kind of want to buy something that looks the size it should be for its date of birth. I think a lot of people get caught up with it is like the sales is a bit of a beauty pageant, and they have this one shape in their head of what they want it to look like, regardless of the 6 months that it could have been born in. So I think looking at the pedigree and looking at the horse, is it what it should be, is a good kind of guide. Obviously there's exceptions to that, but I think if it's a Mayfoal, I would rather it looks like a Mayfoal.
Okay.
Personally.
What's the best piece of advice that you've been given, and not by Peter? Who's actually disappeared? Little fecker.
Oh, he's still there. I can see him.
Is he? Yeah.
The best piece. I've been given a lot of advice, and needed a lot of advice.
But what would you pass on? What do you think is most pertinent to the crowd? And I'm going to open up to questions now very soon. So if anybody has something, please have it to the fore of your mind.
Yeah, I suppose someone said to me fairly sharply once, and it wasn't Dad, that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and to listen more and speak less about certain things. And I think at our stage, or young people's stage, it is a good idea to be aware of who you're in the presence of, and when it's time to listen and to observe and learn, do so, and to kind of take on board things. And if there's certain ways people are doing things in places that you're working, there's normally a reason as to why that is, and to try work out what it is, rather than, oh, we always did it this way and wherever. If you go to a new place and they do it differently, that's a good thing, because if they do it the same way as where you were in the last place, you may as well still be in the last place. So I think always try and learn. We're learning constantly, and things are evolving constantly, so to be always open-minded and willing to take on board things, and yeah, like this industry is amazing for learning things, and there's many ways to skin a cat, and yeah, just to kind of broaden your mind.
Well, the beauty is we can all do the footwork around these complex, and you can do it with Sheikh Mohammed, and you can do it with royalty, and you can do it with Arab giants, and you can beat them if you're lucky enough and savvy enough. And that's like the one industry where you can do that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with the most money. The one thing I can say is that the cheapest thing you can do is you go to see as many horses as you can. You record your notes. We all have these fancy iPads now. Some people don't like them, some people do. But you can then go back and see whether they were any good or not. And that's the one thing I would say about the Arcana website, is they put the names of the horses on. So when you retrospectively go back to see, what did I say about Paddington? Oh, I said this. Well, his name is there. You know, you don't have to go back on the Tattersall's or Goffs website where you don't have a named horse, and you have to then do a little bit more research. So that's a very easy thing that everybody can do, whether you're 50 years in the game or 5 years in the game. That's homeschooling, as ITV Racing would say. So on that note, I think we're coming up to bedtime for a lot of people. Joan, are you still out there with a microphone?
Here beside me.
Connor has the microphone.
Jane, just going back, in terms of like sire fashionability, like I know we touched on it, and like it's positive, I suppose, to hear Philip like chancing different sires. Maybe now, like I suppose you often hear certain stallions covering up 200, 250 mares. Like it can be very hard to compete, I suppose, with those kind of numbers unless you're at the top of them. Can we see that changing like in the future, or do you have to jump on the bandwagon of fashion and just try and have a very good mare and be at the top of those 200 or 250? Or do you just believe in it? I know like Kildare will maybe use horses that are maybe not so fashionable, and it produces race horses, and then in turn it pays in dividends in other ways because you've upgraded your mare. Or where does that lie, I suppose?
Is this from a breeding perspective?
Breeding and pinhooking, I suppose.
I know, Paul, you're a fan of the proven sire.
Yes, I'm very much a fan of the proven sire. So, and the older I get, the more down that road I'm going. When I buy a filly, or I usually try to start off with a filly that's never had a foal, and I generally go at least 3 proven sires in a row. Now, if I've given her a good few quid for her, I'll possibly spend a good few quid on the stallion to try and make that mare, you know. And so after 3 of those kind of good, proven, maybe slightly expensive stallions, I'll pull back a bit, but I might still go proven. I just kind of, it never made any sense to me to be going year after year to first crop stallions there with your mare. I think you've got to destroy them, you know. The chances are that those stallions won't work out. Very few of them do. So it just makes sense to me to keep going the proven route. And if you're kind of, if you have a nice young mare and you go to a, you know, say a Blue Point or a 2 Down Hot or something like that, Havana Grey, you have a very good chance of getting black type up on that young mare, and then you could hit the jackpot, you know. So
that's his perspective. Now he's dealing with a different purse to some of us.
I just have to laugh a little bit, Paul.
What are you laughing at?
Yeah. Who was the most clever person and had the most blue points in his draft? Who was that? How proven
I told you it
was
was
he?
the stupidest thing I ever did,
How
didn't I?
proven was he when you bought them or you bred them?
Well,
I'm sorry.
When we were entering them into sales in May, we were saying we could end up with a lot of egg in our face here because it mightn't just work. But it did on this occasion. So.
There was logic to your choice, though. Batash being probably the only sprinter that could match Blue Point in that era.
Yeah.
it was a risk, obviously.
It was a risk. But I told the story, I think, already about going to Ascot and seeing Blue Point in the parade ring, and he was just such a magnificent looking horse. And I looked at Charlie Appleby as well, and he was just, you just knew from his body language that he was so confident that it was only a matter of getting that horse down to the start, and he'd come home in front, and that's what happened, you know. And it was just a case of if you can't beat them, join them, you know, so that's how that happened.
So he joined him. What's your principle when you're breeding your mares? See, the Moon's worked out, but he was proven. What's your ratio, proven, unproven? What are your thoughts?
Obviously, I like the proven sires. Sometimes you can't afford them, so you have to split up. But ideally, I like to use a proven horse. And if I can't use a proven horse, at least the unproven sire must be a Group 1 winner. Otherwise, I won't use.
Yeah. Any other questions from the crowd? We have one up there. It's a very topical conversation at the moment with all these horses retiring to stud, and people will be wondering what they might use next year.
Just a sort of semi-financial question. How often for the panel, how often would they, if they're buying a horse for a client, retain financial interest in that horse? Or how do they react when a buyer or somebody coming into the industry asks them to, they're saying they want to spend 40, 50, 60 grand on a foal? How often would they keep a leg of that foal or take a financial interest in it to align interest really with somebody who's new to the industry?
So how often would a vendor you're purchasing from retain an interest in the...
No, or somebody, say an agent, or, well, not necessarily an agent, somebody who you're putting your horses in with, basically. So if for your third-party clients, do you leave all the risk with them, or do you take an interest in a lot of the foals you would buy or yearlings you buy?
You're looking at me at the moment?
Well, I think you mentioned that you were, we had investors, so it is a third party essentially.
Yes, obviously I had to, because as I said at the beginning, I had a wealthy person who wanted to do it. I didn't have the money, and I still don't have the money. But now it has changed, and so I own a bigger or smaller chunk in every horse, but there are people investing together with me. And so there are some horsey people, some are just interested in the return. So as the return in the Pinhook, if it works out, it's so much better than in the stock market or everywhere else. It's quite a tempting thing for people who are wealthy and are investing wherever into assets. With the breeder, that was your question. If the breeder wants to keep a leg, if I do that or not. I would not say that I do it generally. I have done it. It makes it a little bit more complicated. So ideally I buy everything what I have in my portfolio on my own, and then whoever wants to come in can then buy into the shares of the different horses. So it's a little bit complicated, but depending on the amount of money somebody wants to put in, he can then say, okay, I want to have whatever, 10% of every horse, or 20% of the cheaper ones, and 5% of the expensive ones. So that's something I balance out between the people who have an interest. And if there is a breeder involved, then I always think it could influence me. So as I would like to be independent, I better stay outside of all negotiations.
Interesting.
There was a question emailed in as well, just for all of you. It was just in relation to second season sires. What would your thought process be on choosing a second season sire for this year at the foal sales?
So we're talking about horses that have just had runners, or we're talking about horses that have just had foals?
who have their first or their first runners that wore this year.
So you're
going
talking your
into
Blue
next year.
Points, your Magna
Yeah.
Gracia, your Two Down Hots. Alice, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I suppose I wouldn't be opposed to it. As long as the physical matches up, I suppose you could say your Blue Points and your Two Down Hots, they've obviously done very well and have sold very well. I wonder whether they'd be asking more about the ones who'd potentially wouldn't have had super 2-year-olds, but maybe they'll train on and have better 3-year-olds. I suppose the whole pinhook.
Massa.
Sorry, exactly. Yeah, was definitely a lot of people's sleeper, I'd say. It's a speculator's game, so I think it's another
It's a
speculation.
form of a gamble, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's definitely wouldn't be opposed to it. You could look very clever this time next year, or you mightn't look so clever. But we've all been there in both cases, so. I suppose it's everyone's opinion on their speculation of to how it'll play out, but I wouldn't be against it personally.
Philip?
No, I'm definitely not against it. If the horse is nice, I would buy it. I always think if you have a nice horse, well-walking horse, it doesn't really matter. You will sell, yeah.
There's a few people out there with a few free eagles are going to canvas you by the time this is over. Paul, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, where I stand on that is that I always try to buy a good-looking horse. I will sometimes, gamble the stallion, hoping that it'll come up. But I find that if the stallion doesn't come up and you still have a good-looking horse, you'll be able to sell that horse, and the damage won't be too bad. And then if you actually hit on the stallion, the Blue Point or the Two Down Hot or whatever, you can do well. And other stallions then come to a stage in their career, and they're very good stallions, and they're getting stakes winners year after year after year. But just because everybody's had a few of them, they just kind of go off them. And you have to slightly avoid those stallions.
Okay. Any more email questions? Yep, we have a hand.
Hi, just in regards to buying foals, like first foals, would you prefer to see a foal from a mare who already has runners?
Would you mind repeating that question again, sorry?
Sorry, in regards to buying foals, first foals, would you prefer to see a foal from a mare who already has runners?
Paul, we'll give that to you.
You could have asked me that at home, Siobhan. Siobhan has worked for us at home and at the sales. So just say the question again now.
So buying a first foal, do you prefer to see a foal from a mare who already has runners? Or does that make a difference?
If you're buying your first foal, is it?
No, this is the first foal of the mare. Looking at a first
Oh,
foal.
okay,
of the
so would
mare.
you prefer a mare that has had proven...
Yeah. Yes.
No, I would definitely prefer to buy a first foal or a second foal or a third foal of a mare than a foal from a mare who's exposed, an older mare who has, maybe plenty of winners but no black type. I think people always give the younger mare the benefit of the doubt, and they don't forgive that older mare at all. They just say, I remember Tony O'Callaghan telling me years ago, Asher, if they don't do it after 3 or 4 folds or 5 folds, they generally just follow the same old pattern and they turn out the winners, but they don't get the black type, So I'd say that trend is there all right. And I think people will they'll give a chance to a young, unproven mare over an older mare who's proven just to produce ordinary winners,
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome, Siobhan.
There's a microphone over there, Philip. What is that? I think it's pointing at Chris and Ben there. I think you're encouraging them. No more questions. Come on, there must be. I know it's on 9 o'clock now, so we want to wrap it up. But if there is anybody of interest,
question for Paul. You said much earlier on you don't like the breeze ups, and why is that? And where does that leave you and Jim?
not talking, I'd imagine.
Say that again.
You said you don't like the breeze up sales.
Well, I don't like anything whereby a horse is forced out of its comfort zone too much. I like to see them developed at their own pace, and I think it's you have to be very, very patient with animals, and young stock in particular. And it just doesn't sit easy with me. I think they're just forced that little bit, and it's just I'm not comfortable there, so I just don't go there.
It's game of opinions. That's Paul's opinion. And I can imagine Van Dijk is a good example to the contrary, but that's an argument for a whole different seminar. And we are handing the mic back. Is there anybody else that has a question to ask? There's a hand over here. Just in case you were getting cold there, Joan. We're just
well, it's definitely warming me up anyways.
Sorry, just back to the buying again. When you're buying a foal, obviously everyone's on a budget and looking for a bargain. But would you prefer buying a better quality filly or a lesser quality colt, just then to sell on as a yearling? Or how do you decide, and what would be your advice on that?
Who would you like to ask?
Either Paul, Philip, or Alice.
Alice has got the microphone. Oh, go on, take it.
If it was a choice between a better quality filly or a lesser quality colt, I think follow quality. It depends on, like if you zoom out, I suppose, generally speaking, pinhooked colts are tended to be the ones that are favoured. But if you've a good quality filly and she's from a good family, she'll always have a value. But from a pinhooking point of view, I would follow quality personally, but fashions change and that sort of thing. So I can understand where the appeal for the colt would come, but for me it'd be the better quality filly.
Definitely, if you can afford to buy a nice filly foal, always go for that. It's the amount of people who are really looking into quality fillies. I always find it amazing, and I think there is a much better chance of a really high touch with a good filly than with a average colt.
Answer your question? Yeah. Good. Thank you for your question. Anybody else out there? I don't think I see any hands. So on that note, am I going to... Oh, go for it. You were our opener and you may as well be our closer. I hope it's for Tom.
Promise it's not an ethical question. On the prep side of things, to circle back to that, when you watch sort of yearlings go through yearling prep, the yearlings that have previously gone through foal prep for the foal sales, would you see them take up better to the prep itself? Like, do they kind of fall back into that routine because they've previously been prepped? Or would you say that, you know, the ones that haven't previously experienced that, so they kind of stayed out on the field and had sort of their childhood not robbed off of them, would you say they kind of take up better to that, or is there any difference at all? So it's to anyone who's doing prep.
Paul.
Definitely the foals that go through the sales, they are easier to handle, I suppose, and they kind of understand more what's required. I find that the homebreds, the earlier foals get a lot of handling, but the later foals tend to get slightly less handling because they're out of grass that bit. But I said by the time they've all gone through the yearling prep, I wouldn't say you'd be able to tell the difference among any of them, because they get a lot of handling right through the prep, and they should be very, relaxed and comfortable around people at that stage. So I don't think you should be able to tell any difference, if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we bring the curtain down, I have a question of my own, and it's for each of you, each of the pinhookers. Sorry, Tom. The return of mares came out last week, and the population figures are always very interesting. The UK population figures, I don't have the specifics between National Hunt and Flat, so I can't decipher the purpose of each foal, but I can tell you that the population figure from 2013 to 2023 hasn't changed in the UK, whereas we're 2,000 higher in Ireland, which suggests to me saturation is probably here. Would you take that into account, each of you? Because you're thinking of resale, you're thinking of volume of horses at each sale. Are we now at a point where we have to be careful because of getting into sales?
Absolutely, I'd say, yeah. I know, as you said, there's more sales than ever, but that doesn't.
But we all want to go to the same sales.
It doesn't necessarily mean the more sales, the more demand there is. It's just to it's a sort of a quick solution to a long-term problem. I think there'll always be demand for quality, so I think you just need to reassess what you're doing slightly in accordance with those figures, and try and invest in the better quality horses, whether it means for these guys extending your syndicate instead of having 4, having 6 in it, so you can afford the better foals, or something similar to that. Just whatever you can do at whatever level you're operating at, to try and think ahead and think of the bigger picture as to what will still be in demand, even if there is the overproduction going. I suppose something simple as that, yeah.
Yeah, good advice, Philip.
I think it's more important than ever to really look into return of mares, because overproduction does not begin only with the cheaper stallions. We now have an overproduction on the high-end stallions as well. So it does not help you if you buy a Lope de Vega, a Frankel or whatever, if yours is the worst one, which is available on the market, you will automatically lose out, but you have paid on the front end too much for that. So I think it's getting to a dangerous point for us buying these foals, really to assess where we are. Because if you are in the least third of the 160 Lope de Vegas or whatever stallion offspring is there on the market, you will automatically lose out. And so I think we just have to be very careful this year more than in the years before, especially in a correction phase like that, that we don't get carried away by a stallion, that we try to be really in the top end. And it doesn't matter really if it's a Lope de Vega or if it's a Inns of Court, or it doesn't matter. I think you have to be in the top of them to survive with a good price.
Interesting. Would you agree with that, Tom or Paul?
I would agree with both Alice and Philip on that. It's the old question of supply and demand, and definitely you could feel it at the sales this year. There's a change there, and it's a change not for the better. I'm normally a glass half full kind of a person, but I would be cautious going into the next few years. There are a lot of challenges there for our sport, and definitely the numbers is always a factor. And you could feel it actually this year in Book 3 in Newmarket. The money was running out, and whereas in the previous few years, Book 1 is very strong, carried into Book 2, and then Book 2 carried into Book 3, but it wasn't like that this year. So I just I'd be a little bit on the cautious side, and I'd be give a lot of thought to where you'd place your horses next year.
If you weren't cautious before you came here, guys, you're even more cautious now. Conor, I'm going to hand back over to you as the head man for the next generation. I don't know about you guys, but I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to the guys chat and learning a few things along the way.
Thanks, Jane. Again, I'd just like to pay a huge thanks to each of the panelists and Jane and everyone that came here tonight. I hope you will take a lot from it, and best of luck to each of you or any of you that do go pinhooking in the future. Thanks.
Well done.